Recording in progress.
Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday, May 19th, 2022 meeting of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. It's nice to see some faces out in the audience. And in accordance with the state mandates, the County of Humboldt Planning Commission meeting will be held virtually until further notice pursuant to Assembly Bill 361. With that, I will call the meeting to order and ask everybody to join me in a salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Suzanne. Welcome back. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Could I get a roll call for Commissioner Mulder?
Here.
Commissioner Newman?
Present.
Commissioner Mitchell? No, he's not here. Commissioner Bongio?
Here.
Commissioner Levy?
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Here.
And Commissioner McCaver is absent. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Director, do we have any agenda modifications tonight? There's Commissioner McCaver, so she showed up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item number 6 on the consent calendar, the hog trap farms. We would like to, the applicant has requested to have that pulled off consent and continued to a date uncertain, so that'll need to be done as part of the consent calendar, or you could do that now. I think the other thing that I would ask, and this is strictly within your discretion whether or not you want to do this, given the fact that the workshop for the Nordic project was at the end of the meeting that it was scheduled on, and really did not give it enough time to finish the workshop, and it's shown on the agenda as the last item on the agenda. If perhaps you would consider moving it someplace else and maybe giving it a time certain. That's completely within your discretion, though.
I'll ask the commission how they feel about that. Everybody else will be getting moved if we do that, and I think we gave them special preference at the last meeting when they gave their and moved them to the front of the line. So is there any thoughts for me that if you want to move them up? I'm willing to do it if everybody's in agreement. Go ahead, Thomas.
I would say my opinion would be there's that one and I think one or two other projects that were specifically moved to this meeting. So maybe hear those items that we moved from the previous meeting before anything that's pulled from consent or something, or any new projects before us tonight. Just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, I was going to say kind of what you said, Alan, which is that we gave them a lot of time last time. I see it's on the agenda. I do hope we will get to it, but we have a pretty full agenda, and I would hate to put 4 other projects at the end when we may not get to them. So I'm kind of inclined to keep it where it is.
Could we, Director, ask that if we don't get to that it's at the front of next meeting's agenda?
Yes.
All right. I mean, go ahead, Mike.
I'm in agreement there.
Okay. We're going to keep things the way they are. Everybody's been waiting. I think we've delayed at least one of these twice. So.
Yeah, I was just going to mention there's the fair one that has been bapped around.
Sorry for anybody if that is uncomfortable, but we got a lot to get through, and that's the way the agenda came, so I think we should stick with it. All right. Yes, sorry, Suzanne.
Apparently, we have a problem with the Zoom feed going out, so if we could take a moment to try to address the Zoom, so then we can reconvene and go. Thank you.
All right, let's let them try to figure that out. Is there anything else Director, that you want to discuss or anything while they're, I guess we should have the feed going to do that, so. Apologize for that. How you doing? The delay. So just that was the one agenda modification. Okay. So now we'll go to public comment, and this is a time when anybody can speak on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. So if you have anything you'd like to talk to the commission about that is not on the agenda tonight, here's your opportunity. Just come up to the mic if you're in the audience, and I will look to see if we have attendees, and it looks like we do. Seeing nobody at the mic, the first caller is 7429. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. This is Roby Tenorio, and I was calling in at this open time to bring up the topic of maps. I want to encourage your commission to put more resources into continuing to develop them. You could really take advantage of some of the wonderful tools they have now with the help of technology. You can map anything and everything. It's a great way to see the micro and the whole or the larger picture, and I think they could really help you with presenting a lot of information that would be good for you to have when making long-term decisions. And one of the issues with why roads are important to have on maps is that most people, or the public, were very oriented by roads or to roads. So, yeah, that's for you to continue to develop your maps. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller is 5288. There you go.
Oh, can you hear me? That took a couple of tries there, but anyway, what the prior speaker said is quite important. There are those who are afraid that people may find their grow sites or something because of knowing where roads are. Well, you have a legal business. You have every right to protect your property. I don't know any other business that is precluded, that is unable to have the luxury of not having anybody knowing where they're at, just what it is. I did want to speak. We have something called a Q zone, which was put on the Annie and Mary Railroad, and that wasn't actually put into effect. I talked to John Ford, and that didn't come forward. But I did want you to be aware that you need to get a schedule for your zoning, and that all these zoning that should have been done 3 years ago was tied up in litigation. My understanding it's not. You need community plans, and you need zoning. I mean, it's part of the general plan, which was how many years ago. So the other thing I have a major concern with is, as was brought up by many people, is a total lack of enforcement. happening within this business. You permit, the permittees, in the opinion of the public, are not following the rules. You have many examples of that, and yet we see no enforcement. The enforcement's not just to bring someone into compliance. The enforcement's to send a message. If you violate this, and it's part of an agreement you signed, you need to understand what the agreement is. If you don't, and we find out you're not covering up your grow, you're not doing this or that, it needs to be instant revocation of permit with prejudice. That site will never be permitted again. You're sending a message out there. Oh, if you get caught, just go ahead and maybe you fix it, maybe you don't, and that's just the way it is. That's not a very effective way as far as things go. The other main thing you're going to have to look at is some kind of method for cleaning up all the sites that are being left out there. I talk to people all over, and some people say different, but they're being abandoned, and you're going to have to clean those up somehow. And finally, I have a major problem with this quote-unquote moving the goalpost. Well, lately we've had a whole bunch of people in this particular business moving the goalpost. They have no problem when it's moving closer to them so they can score their touchdown sooner. So the goalpost should not be moved in either direction if that's what you want to do, or else definitely the taxes should have remained the same. The rules should not be relaxed for any way, shape, or form. The goalpost move in either direction is unfair to certain parties out there. So those are my comments today on non-agendized items. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next caller, 7108.
Good evening. This is Bonnie Blackberry, and I wanted to comment about the maps, the watershed maps, which I was really looking forward to and hoping they would be able to help the planning commissioners get a broader look at where these farms are and what's going on around them. But without having the roads, on there makes it really difficult to figure out anything. And this is a legal business. We've got farms right on the edge of roads. So I think this thing of not labeling them to protect the farmer just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the other thing that I noticed was 4 out of 5 of these cannabis projects don't have watershed maps accompanying them. I noticed that the zoning administrator meetings, the plans there don't, and I thought that was a problem, but now not having them on these plans coming before the Planning Commission, I think, is problematic. And it's my understanding that the county doesn't have the staff to go out and monitor these permits and do the yearly annual check, that those aren't happening on a lot of projects. And so I'm concerned if we can't keep up with them now, and we've got hundreds in the queue, how, and without monitoring, we're just supposed to assume everything's fine when neighbors are noticing it's not so fine. So thank you for hearing my comment.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on non-agenda items? All right. With that, I will close the public comment period, and we will move on to the consent. And as usual, I will go through each item and ask if anybody wants to have that item pulled from the commission or from the audience. So just raise your hand if you want it pulled, or put your hand up on the Zoom. So the first item is a Lang minor subdivision in the Hydesville area. Is there anybody who wishes to have this item pulled? Seeing none, we'll leave this one on consent. Item number 2 is the Strombeck minor subdivision and plan unit development in the Eureka area. Is there anybody who wishes to have this item pulled?
What's that again? Which one?
Strombeck. Seeing none, we'll leave that on consent. Item number 3, Serendipity Associates Incorporated, conditional use permit and special permit in the Garberville area. There's a hand up on the Zoom, so we'll pull this one. All right. Item number 4, Daydream Enterprises LLC, conditional use permit and special permit in the Densmore area. Anybody who wishes to have this one pulled? I see the hand up still on Zoom. Is that up from the last time? It's the same number. Okay, so this one will be pulled?
No.
No, there's a hand. So he put it back up. So we will pull that one. Thanks, Mike. All right, number 5, Bear Creek Ranch Farm Incorporated, conditional use permit in the Densmore area. Is there anybody who wishes to have this one pulled? Seeing none, we'll leave that one on. Okay, so we will pull that one. It came up late, sorry. All right, that brings us to item number 6, which we already were asked, we're gonna move that one, so that'll be a separate item that we'll deal with. And item number 7 is the Holgerson minor subdivision and coastal development permit in the Myrtletown area. Oh, you're right. You're right. I didn't highlight it, so I didn't see it. Thank you. And that same thing with item number 8, which is the Vista 36 LLC special permit in the Blue Lake area. It was continued as well. And that brings us to our last item on consent, and that's Nature's Health Group Incorporated special permit with 2 in the Nealon area.
I'd like to pull that.
Okay. So, with that, we are going to have, on consent, we will have item number 2. Item number 1, item number 2, item number 7 and 8. So could I get a motion to approve those items?
Also move.
I'll second Commissioner Newman's motion.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Suzanne, a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Mulder,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner Livy,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Suzanne. So that brings us, we have to move to a date uncertain, item number 6. Yes, ma'am? What?
I have a question. Did you just get Holgerson out of the way?
Holgerson
Was continued already.
it was
It was-
part of the
it was-
agenda.
I asked for clarification. She said I shouldn't talk on it. It was on the agenda, so I didn't talk in the preliminaries.
It is continued, but if you can't, we will let you come up and speak. Let us get some housekeeping done here, and then we'll let you speak on that one if you'd wish to. All right, so we need to have a motion to continue item number 6, Hog Trap Farms LLC conditional use permit in the New Harris area to a date uncertain.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in agreement?
Thomas, you were second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roll call vote, please. Suzanne?
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
and Commissioner Mulder. Thank you.
Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Suzanne. Now I'll give an opportunity for anybody who came tonight not knowing that it had been continued for either the whole item number 7, the Holgerson minor subdivision and coastal development permit in Myrtletown, and also the Vista 36 LLC special permit in the Blue Lake area. Both of those were continued. So if there's anybody that wants to speak on either one of them.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing my hand. My name is Sina Marino. I live on Circle Drive, and I had a chance to go through the draft initial proposal, and also people were sending me some, I guess they're websites or something, articles, and one of them was about retention and detention basins, and they have pictures of them, and they had a description of them. They take a large area, they take excavation down to a low spot, and the detention basin is supposed to empty quickly because it has a pipe going out the bottom, a drain and a pipe. A retention one has a large area, and it's supposed to disseminate by the ground and up into the sky, and it's usually a pond or something, so it's a problem with drowning and things like that. Okay, each one of them has a diversion thing where you're supposed to, any overflow goes somewhere. Well, the somewhere that it's going to go on this proposal is into my yard and to Tim Clossey's yard. So I think that really needs to be mitigated for sure. And both types attract mosquitoes. That's in the article. And the planner, Michael Taylor, in this article, recommends floors 12 inches higher than the pond high water level. I think that means he thinks it's going to overflow a little bit. And when he was saying so many feet per second, I was doing the multiplication. It sounds like in 20 minutes, the thing's going to overflow the way they have it planned. He also recommended collection and discharge points for the water. And that's all I have to say. I do have the 2 articles. Anybody wants to look at them and see discussion? I found it very useful.
Let it go that way, and then it can
Talk.
come back the other way. Thank you. I see we have one hand up in the public, so 5288, go ahead.
Thank you for my opportunity. I will not be available. I'll be out of country and traveling on June 2nd, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak. This is what I refer to as, I don't know, it's what is an attitude, an LA special subdivision. You ask for things you know you're not going to get because they're ridiculous beyond belief, and then you hope you're going to negotiate down to something else. Well, I would basically throw this project out. They have all kinds of variances. Any of these variances on minimum road, not paving, not sidewalk, not curb, that the rest of us would have to do in a subdivision. I find it personally insulting that someone would bring a project to this point, and I can see why they've continued it to another meeting. Look at this carefully. Pretend like you were building the subdivision, and what would you be required to do? And we do need housing, but on the other hand, you need to address these problems and the concerns of the rest of the neighbors. I guess we'll speak on the second. Thank you for my opportunity to speak on this project.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment. And we will move on to the items that were pulled from consent. And the first item is Serendipity Associates Incorporated conditional use permit and special permit in the Garberville area. I'll take a staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the project before you tonight is for Serendipity Associates. It's project number 11940. The project area is located at 671 South Base Road in the Garberville area. The parcel is zoned forestry recreation, and the land use designation is residential agriculture. The applicant is seeking a conditional use permit for 16,934 square feet of existing cultivation Approximately 7,000 of that square footage is mixed light cultivation, and just under 10,000 is outdoor cultivation. The applicant is also seeking a special permit to permit work within the streamside management area to allow for culvert replacement and other activities that are recommended by the Water Resources Protection Plan. The source of irrigation for this project is a 600,000 gallon rainwater catchment pond. The applicant anticipates using approximately 252,000 gallons of water annually, or about 15 gallons a square foot. Water storage totals 611,000 gallons. The majority of that is in the pond, and then there are 4 tanks that store about 11,000 gallons of water. And the primary source of electrical power is a solar array. Here's a site plan showing the location of cultivation and the rainwater catchment pond on the site. And a number of conditions of approval have been applied to this project. Corrective actions identified in the Lake and Streambed Alteration Agreement, the Water Resources Protection Plan, a Biological Resources Assessment, and the Road Evaluation Report. These include things like replacing undersized culverts, modifying existing French drain systems, decommissioning a crossing and an on-stream reservoir, and widening undersized gates. The applicant is also conditioned to perform annual bullfrog monitoring at the rainwater catchment pond, consistent with the recommendations of the California Division of Fish and Wildlife. And then standard conditions related to the inadvertent discovery protocol and intersections with public roads have also been applied to this project. Staff have performed a CEQA analysis for this project, and after analyzing all available documentation, have found the project to be consistent with the impacts identified and adequately mitigated in the original mitigated negative declaration. The project, as conditioned, would result in no significant adverse environmental effects beyond those identified in the MND. And so staff would recommend that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to approve this conditional use permit and special permit to allow Serendipity Associates to continue to operate 16,934 square feet of cannabis cultivation. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff? No? Okay. I'll open it up for public comment then. And the first caller is 5288.
So just to move things along here, I also pulled number 4 and number 6. I think maybe 8 was kicked off there. I don't need staff reports on this one. I appreciate the staff report. It did fill in some things. It sounds like a great project with the 20 kW battery storage. I compliment them on that. I have a problem with staff here, and I'm going to continue to do it, and they kind of get insulted when I don't take time to go through their whole study. But we need it. We need a template here. That's the reason I pulled it. There was no mention of the water at all, any amount, where it came from or anything. Appreciate that being brought forward in the staff report. But if you want me not to pull these things, then you need to have a template, and water was not mentioned as far as the description of this project, as far as when it was agendized. So that's my only comment on this one. Otherwise, it looked like a great project. And again, on 4 or 6, I pulled those, and I don't need a staff report on either of them, just to make comments if you desire.
Thank you. The next caller is 7108.
Yes. This is solar is the primary energy source, but then you have 2 generators. So I'm wondering about that. And this says mixed light and outdoor. And the outdoor actually light up. It's very confusing with the state categorizing mixed light depth as mixed light tier 1, and the county having outdoor meaning outdoor full sun or outdoor light depth, which is a big difference because when you need to have fans and humidifiers and a bunch of stuff that requires more power, is going to happen with the light depth, whereas outdoor doesn't take all that. And then that's all I have for now. The two. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Anybody in the audience out here, come up to the mic if you do. All right, seeing no other public, I'll close public comment on this one and bring it back to the commission. Go ahead, Noah.
Okay, thank you. While I do not always agree with Mr. Sawatsky's comments, I certainly do agree with him on this one. I think we've come a long way from where we used to be in terms of making sure that the executive summary of each staff report is available separately on Excella. But I do think that while we may need to read the whole report, it's reasonable that a lot of people attending and watching from the public are relying only on that paragraph that appears on the agenda. And 9 out of 10 of them do touch all the major points that are likely to come up, water, power, number of employees, zoning, things like that. But then some of them do not. And I never understand why that's the case. And I think he's right to say that we should just have a standard template that includes all of those key items, certainly water and power, since those are, 3/4 of the time, that's the source of people's concerns. That basic information should be summarized. So just wanted to echo what he said and say that I support that request. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Thomas, you have your hand up? Go ahead.
I see it right in the beginning of the project description and the beginning of it as well. I understand in the agenda posted, but I think this is a great project. It's got solar,
Yeah.
rainwater catchment. I mean, it checks all the boxes, so that's actually where I put a check on it, whatever. And with that, I'm going to make a motion to find that the commission has considered the addendum to the adopted mitigated negative declaration for the commercial medical land use ordinance, and it's described in section 15164 state CEQA guidelines, and make the required findings for approval of the conditional use permit, and approve the Serendipity Associates Inc. conditional use permit and special permits as recommended by staff, subject to the recommended conditions.
I'll second.
All right.
And I will add that I do think it's a good project. I didn't mean to disparage the project.
I'd like to add that I support Commissioner Levy's comments, and that we have, as a commission, over the last few years, upon numerous times requested that the water usage per square foot even be in the executive summary. And I would like to see that information every time as well.
I apologize if I can. Normally it is. Normally I review every single thing in the agenda. Last week I ran out of time and didn't get to it. I apologize.
No worries, but thank you, John.
We have had a few meetings in a row.
We have.
Yeah.
I think they've been pretty busy.
Thank you, Director, for that comment. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Suzanne? Please.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Motion carries 6-0. All right. With that, we move on to item number 5, Bear Creek Ranch Farm Incorporated, conditional use permit in the Densmore area.
And if I remember correctly, that was the same person that pulled.
Yes.
And Kent just said for 4
So,
and 5.
yeah.
And we don't need a
I
staff
think any-
report.
Yeah. So if, well, there's another hand up, so that's not Kent. So do we need a staff report on this or not?
Your discretion.
I'm going to say no and save time because we got a lot on the agenda. I will
Thank you.
take public comment, though, and the first commenter is 7108.
Yes, I just had some quick comments. First, there's no watershed map for this project, which would help seeing what else is going on around there. And the other thing on this one is 3 generators. So anyway, I just think that's a problem. But maybe you guys don't. So thanks for letting me comment.
Thank you. Next public is 5288.
I didn't pull this one. I thought I pulled number 4, number 6, 5. I didn't seem to have problems with. Major problems with number 4 in that it had a 320-watt solar system, which is nothing, and was going to put in something else when it was feasible, which of course is a ridiculous thing. So I thought I pulled 4. Maybe I messed up. I'll apologize. I guess one slipped by that should have had some attention as far as I'm concerned if that went on consent.
We are on number
Chair.
5, correct?
Yeah. Sorry, we jumped to number 5. He did pull number 4 also.
I apologize. I must have turned the page. I apologize. I'll go back to 4 after this one. Let's just continue this one while we're in the middle of it. So is there any more comment on this one? Go ahead. Please come up. If more than one person, get lined up so it saves time. Welcome.
My name's Vanessa, and I represent this farm, Vanessa Valari. I just want to clear up the generator thing for Bonnie. There are 3 generators. They're all small Honda generators. There's one 7,000 Honda gasoline generator that is primarily used for domestic purposes. There is a Honda 3,000 gasoline generator that is used to power fans, the water pump in the pond, and for ancillary cannabis activities. And there is also a Honda 2,000 generator that is used to power the mixers for the feeding tanks and is a backup if they need for the other generators. But total in power, we're really talking about a household's amount of power usage. It's not like we have 3 diesel generators or something on the site. And they do have a plan to come off of all of this and be on solar power in the future. I think that was really the only comment.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the commission. So where do we want to go with this?
Well, I'm satisfied with the mitigations for their transition to solar power and did not have any other concerns. So I will go ahead and move that we find the commission has considered the addendum to the adopted mitigated negative declaration for the CMLUO, CCMLUO as described by Section 15164 of the state CEQA guidelines, make all the required findings for approval of the CUP and special permit, and approve the Daydream Enterprises, Bear Creek Ranch. I was reading from the wrong one, but I believe it's the same motion, and approve the Bear Creek Ranch Farm conditional use permit. No special permit, my mistake. Subject as recommended by staff, subject to the recommended conditions.
I'll second.
Sorry if that was confusing.
Go ahead, Thomas.
I just wanted to, I support this project because the mitigation measures are more extreme than what the actual ordinance calls for. So I feel that if there's mitigation measures that are outside of and more extreme than what's in the ordinance, we're doing more than our work there, in my opinion.
It's a good point. All right.
I did have a question
Yes.
regarding the watershed maps. Was there, was that just this week? I
Seems
know
that
we
what-
received
It
extras,
seems like what can go wrong has gone wrong this week. There are maps missing. I do hope that the commission is seeing that the roads are on the maps now.
Yes.
And so we have modified the maps and put the roads in there, and they're labeled in terms of the road type. But
Thank you. Anything else? So we had a motion. I don't remember who made the motion, who made the second, but
Yeah, no, and
okay.
Melanie.
Suzanne, roll call vote, please. Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Bongio.
Yes.
Commissioner Levy.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Motion carries 6-0. All right, now we will go back to number 4, Daydream Enterprises LLC, conditional use permit and special permit in the Densmore area. And we won't have a staff report, but we will open it up for public comment because, go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just for the, we did hear what the concern was, and I do want to note that there is a condition of approval for them to move to solar and be 80% renewable by the end of 2026. So I just want to get that out there before we move into public comment.
Okay, thank you. With that, open it up to public comment, and the first caller is 5288.
Got it first time, I believe. I'm glad that Cliff wanted to address that, but I still find this to be not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. It's not a daydream. We continually have this little bit of nightmare on this thing. A 320-watt solar array is probably something you get at Harbor Freight. I don't know. It's not much of anything. It's kind of like waving a solar array at the thing. And it does say when financially feasible, so it's too bad Cliff didn't have that included in this so that was clear to the public instead of the term once financially feasible. And of course I had a discussion with John about that. Financially feasible is a very relative thing, isn't it? So maybe that term won't be used in the description anymore. I would request you be a little bit more clarity and not say something that's actually incorrect in your description. I do want to be noted in here that processing activities will occur in a 768 square foot commercial building. And of course, that's powered by generators, which is not a small use when you come to processing there. And this should not be taking place out in the wild out there. That should be taking place in a processing center rather than on generators. In addition to that, there's also 1,000 square foot of proposed ancillary propagation. And again, that's another very high usage, which you're not going to do anything with 320-watt solar array. So I would just ask possibly if the applicant is in the room that they'd be willing to move faster than 2026. That's quite a ways off still. And I understand financially feasible is an interesting term. Please don't use that again, Cliff. And anyway, I appreciate my time to comment on this one. But again, it's just a consistency factor here. I would hope the applicant would voluntarily, if asked, move forward a little quicker than that and maybe at least partially get rid of this high energy use out where it doesn't belong. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next caller is public 7108.
Hi. I just wanted to comment about the generators and the ordinance for cannabis cultivation. It was assumed that the people that didn't have renewable or were hooked into PG&E or something wouldn't be doing processing on site, that they would take it to another location. So these generators and the processing, that's where a whole bunch of the power goes, from my understanding, from dehumidifiers, trimming machines, and on and on. So I just think that's kind of a really gray area and should be considered when people are doing these operations out where there is no power, and then deciding they're going to do the processing as well with generators. So thanks for hearing my comments.
Thank you. Next caller, Margro Advisors. *6 to unmute. No, you are unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. This is Kelly with Margaret Advisors. We are the agent for the applicant. The applicant is here to answer questions. We want to make some clarification. One thing to keep in mind is this is actually the second parcel of a two-parcel farm. The ancillary processing as well as this is a proposed processing facility. Right now, it is taken off-site for processing. So has minimal power usage requirements because it is an outdoor cultivation. Generators are used for backup, and the applicant is planning to expand our solar on both parcels. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this one? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. Go ahead, Thomas.
So I'm going to ask a bunch of really stupid questions, and I apologize for staff. Is there anything in the ordinance 1.0 that requires generator use, that limits generator use other than the noise ordinance?
No.
Okay, so with that being said, I see that we have a condition 10 in here that is going to move it to 80% renewable energy, and the applicant agreed to that. So having a project pulled that's agreeing to back off their energy consumption when the ordinance does not require that, I think, I don't know. It's just frustrating, is all I can say.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have comments? Or somebody like to make a motion on this one?
I'll make the motion to, let me get to the right page here. Find that the commission has considered the addendum to the adopted mitigated negative declaration for the commercial CCMLUO as described by section 15164 state CEQA guidelines, make all the required findings for approval of the conditional use permit and special permit, and approve the Daydream Enterprise LLC conditional use permit and special permit as recommended by staff, subject to recommended conditions.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Suzanne, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Motion carries unanimous. All right, that brings us on to, I believe, item number 9, which is our last consent item, and it's Nature's Health Group Incorporated Special Permit 2 in the Neeland area. And I'll take a staff report on this one. I don't believe this is what one of the ones Kent pulled, so. No, it did. Okay, yeah.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. Sharing my screen now. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Megan Acevedo, and I am the assigned planner for Nature's Health Group. Nature's Health Group is applying for 2 special permits. One special permit is for a cannabis micro business, and one special permit is being requested to approve a setback reduction to a nearby school bus stop. The project is located in the freshwater community planning area in the Neeland area. Here is an aerial image of the location for Nature's Health Group and its proximity to Neeland and freshwater. The project is located northwest from Neeland and north from freshwater. The project is accessed from a 300-foot section of privately maintained shale lane from county-maintained Greenwood Heights Drive. Greenwood Heights Drive is a Category 4 road with centerline stripe. The applicant submitted a road evaluation report for the 300-foot section of shale lane, designating it as being developed to the equivalent of a Category 4 standard. The parcel is zoned agriculture general with a land use designation of residential agriculture and is 5.15 acres. The applicant is applying for a special permit to conduct a cannabis microbusiness consisting of 9,900 square feet of mixed light cultivation with 1,125 square feet of ancillary propagation, non-flammable extraction activities, including the making of bubble hash, keef, rosin, and pre-rolls, and distribution activities. Of the 9,900 square feet of cultivation, 5,500 square feet is pre-existing. Water will come from rain catchment collected off of rooftops, connected to 64,400 gallons of hard tank water storage. And water will be recycled with the use of dehumidifiers within the greenhouses connected to water tanks. Total anticipated water needed for the project is 94,000 gallons, 90,000 gallons for irrigation needs, 1,000 gallons for distribution activities, and 3,000 gallons for manufacturing activities. The applicant anticipates a low amount of water needed for irrigation due to the high humidity of the area and the use of water conservation methods. Drying and curing will occur on site, and trimming will occur off-site at a licensed processing facility. Power is sourced by 100% renewable energy through PG&E's Community Choice Energy Renewable Program. Up to 6 employees will be used for activities on site. Mixed light greenhouses are shown in green. The propagation greenhouse is shown in yellow, and the drying area is shown in orange, and the proposed manufacturing and distribution building is shown in purple. An additional special permit is being requested to approve a setback reduction to a nearby school bus stop, shown with a yellow star, which is approximately 200 feet to the nearest cultivation site. The applicant will utilize carbon filters within fully enclosed greenhouses and drying areas. A site visit was conducted on July 9th, 2021, and photos were taken which show that there is no visual line of sight from the school bus stop or adjacent roads to the cultivation activities. The project received comments from the Freshwater School District on April 21st, 2022, stating that the district cannot recommend approval of a permit to engage in federally illegal activities without risking federal consequences, and made a non-recommendation of approval for the setback reduction. It has been determined that if cannabis cannot be seen or smelled, its presence would not be detrimental to the students. Several public comments have been received from nearby neighbors expressing concerns regarding water usage from the on-site well and its effects to surrounding water sources, the presence of a school bus stop within 600 feet of the cultivation area, past presence of aggressive dogs on site, the increase of traffic on the access road, potentially inadequate power provided by PG&E for the project's needs, concerns regarding runoff, safety and security, concerns about the approved 3-acre conversion on site, the distance to the fire department, past power outages in the area, and the potential contamination of surrounding water sources with the use of agricultural chemicals. The public concerns about the project have been included and addressed in the staff report. Water will not be sourced from the on-site well and will come from rain catchment and dehumidifiers. The project is conditioned not to provide water for cannabis irrigation from the permitted well on site. Greenhouses will be fully enclosed with carbon filters, and cannabis is not visible from the school bus stop or adjacent roads. The applicant stated that no one has lived on site in the last 3 years and no dogs are planned to be on site in the future. The property is fully fenced and will be closed if dogs are present on site. Employees will carpool to and from the site, resulting in no more than 6 vehicle trips per day. 2 additional trips may occur with an off-site visitor or the occasional distribution trip. A maximum of 8 vehicle trips are anticipated per day, and the access road has been determined to meet the needs for the project. The project has been conditioned to confirm that an adequate amount of power is provided to the site by PG&E prior to being able to commence additional activities of mixed light cultivation, non-flammable manufacturing, or distribution. The greenhouses will be fully enclosed, and the site is enrolled in the Water Board General Order, is required to comply with standard conditions of the order to prevent runoff, and nutrients are required to be applied according to their labeled instructions. The applicant did have tree removal conducted through an approved less than 3 acre conversion permit with CAL FIRE. The conversion area is not associated to cannabis activities on site. The project has been conditioned to add the 3 acre conversion area as a cannabis restricted area to the site plan and shall not be used for cannabis activities. The applicant will utilize locked gates and security cameras with automatic notification systems for on-site security. The project was referred to the Humboldt #1 Fire Protection District, and the agency recommended approval for the project. As well, the project has been conditioned to add a minimum of 25,000 gallons of additional water storage on site to be designated for fire suppression. There is no existing emergency backup power source on site, and an added condition may be applied to require the applicant to have an emergency backup power source to ensure that carbon filtration systems are adequately running during a power outage. This concludes my presentation, and myself and staff are available to answer questions.
All right, any questions for Megan? No?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that presentation. I do appreciate that you highlighted the concerns expressed by public comment. I was surprised to find this one on the consent calendar because it does have quite a few pretty strong letters of objection, and I don't know, but I'm expecting we may hear from some of them tonight. But what I wanted to note is that what I found most egregious in the letters of concern was not even mentioned in the staff report, which is the allegation, and it is just an allegation, but it's echoed by 3 or 4 of the letters, that this owner, illegally attached a water pipe to steal water from the community water system, which was subsequently discovered, disconnected, and caused the community water system, I think, $15,000 worth of damage, and this owner never acknowledged it, never made amends. And more generally, there's a sort of a lot of different types of bad behavior that are alleged to have been associated with this property, which, any 1 or 2 or 3 of them might be explainable and resolvable. But when you put all those different things together, it makes me feel that we would have to give really extra special attention before approving this particular project based on that history. With all that said, and that's kind of more of a comment, I did also have a question. I may have missed something, but it seems that well, another comment and then a question. I appreciate that you've got the water use per square foot listed in this staff report, but even with the applicant's assertion that this is a particularly humid area, and I don't really know what that means. I don't see why it's more humid than anywhere else. This is a very, very low amount of water to depend on for what I think is planned to have 4 to 5 cycles per year. It just doesn't seem plausible to me about the water use being sufficient. And then the question that I have is, unless I misunderstood, it seems that the total water storage available is only 64,000 gallons, but the anticipated annual water use for the project is 94,000. Even if that were to be sufficient, I'm unclear how that additional storage is going to... it's a rainwater catchment system without adequate storage, so I don't understand how that projected water use is going to be sufficient with the only 64,000 gallons of storage. Sorry if I misunderstood about the storage. Maybe you addressed that in your report, but could you speak to the water storage requirements of this project and anticipated water use?
So this question was brought up to the applicant, how they would provide enough water without adequate storage. And he plans to utilize dehumidifiers that will be connected to the water tanks, which will refill them as he is using the water. The other added condition that I put on the project is that they're to monitor their water usage, and if there's not enough storage on site to meet their needs, and they're supposed to also meter the water collected from dehumidifiers, that they would lessen their amount of cultivation or shorten their cultivation season.
Okay, thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Go ahead, Thomas.
So, thank you, Commissioner Levy. You actually stole a lot of my comments because I wrote letter about the water theft is what I put in my notes.
He does that a lot.
It's a good question. From staff, I have two questions. Number one is the current, when those allegations took place, the year of those allegations, was the current applicant the current landowner? That's question number one. And question number two I have is, and maybe I missed it, is there a condition, obviously that you're not going to get more rain catchment now, so is there a condition that only so many amount of square feet would be, if approved, would be able to be planted this year?
For the first question, the applicant was the applicant during the time of the allegation. And then for your second question, the project is conditioned to fill up the tanks with rainwater before being able to commence activities on site. They don't have an interim permit right now, and they haven't conducted cultivation activities since last year.
Okay, thank you for that. If the applicant, and maybe I heard that wrong, if the applicant was the owner when those allegations took place, would it be unjust for the commission to add another condition that they should rectify anything, I mean, past history or past damage? Is it unjust of the commission to potentially add a condition of approval to make that wrong right?
Go ahead, Director.
I think based upon the circumstances associated with the fact that they were operating at the time, Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but under an interim permit, that it is overall part of the operation of the site, and if there are things that need to be corrected, that would certainly be appropriate to condition.
Thank you for that, because I looked at it as like an culvert that someone put in illegally, or a road crossing, or just, as an environmental thing. So that's where I came from with that question.
All right. Go ahead, Peggy.
I don't understand this. I guess this is a question for staff, but I know maybe this isn't a big thing to someone, but in the ordinance it says 600 feet from a bus stop, and it's only 200, which isn't, it's quite a big difference between 200 and 600. And you can just say, well, you can't see it, so we don't have to follow that rule. I don't, it seems like you could just ignore everything if you just ignore things like that. So I couldn't support it. I mean, I don't know if they went to the school and asked if they could move the bus stop or if that's even feasible, but if that's a rule, that's a rule. And I don't think we should just say, okay, you can't see it, so we don't have to follow that rule.
All right. Go ahead, Director.
If I could maybe give a little background on that. Under 1.0, the original ordinance, the 600-foot setback from the bus stop was put in there. 600 feet from a bus stop is not something that's in state law. It's 600 feet from the school. The county chose to set a dimension of 600 feet from a bus stop also. One of the things we ran into was that then it allowed the setback to be reduced by concurrence with the school districts and the school superintendents. And that became very difficult for the school districts because then they felt like they were put in a place of having to make land use decisions. And the scream literally from all the districts was, get us out of the land use business. That's your business. That's not our business. we don't want to make decisions about bus stops and setbacks from bus stops. And so when the 2.0 ordinance was being considered, the Planning Commission really debated whether or not the 600 feet should be taken out completely or whether it should be retained with the ability for the county to make the decision about whether or not it would be appropriate for a reduced setback to be approved. And I think what Ms. Azevedo did was kind of outlined reasons that the Planning Commission could consider for reducing the setback. If you can't see it, if you can't smell it because they're using carbon filtration, if you don't know it's there, then is a 600-foot setback necessary?
All right. Thank you.
Didn't they say they were making hash on this property?
That's part of the application, is they're asking for a permit that would allow them to do a number of different activities. And in addition to the cultivation, it's a micro business. And so that would allow them to do manufacturing and usually distribution. And so that would be part of the permit, yes.
I've never made hash, so I don't know what was involved in that, but is there any kind of flammables?
And Megan, can you clarify what the type of manufacturing is proposed here?
It's non-flammable manufacturing. And also the 2-point ordinance does not require the setback from manufacturing or distribution facilities that are within fully enclosed structures.
Okay. Go ahead, Melanie.
I have a question for the planner. We received a public comment saying that the current owner does not contribute to the Shale Road Association, and I was wondering if that was in the plans or if that's going to remain the same.
So the applicant, I'm not aware that they are a part of a road maintenance association, but they are required to improve that driveway from Shale Lane. And part of post-approval, they would be required to enter into a road maintenance association. But that private the private road is a 300-foot section from the county maintained road. So it's a very short section of the road.
So when you say that they would be required to join the homeowners association, is the county, before they're going to issue this permit, going to require that they have that document done?
I didn't include it as a condition, but that's something that our post-approval team is facilitating, and I'm not exactly sure what the time frame would be.
Thank you. Thomas, you have your hand up?
Isn't the joining the Road Maintenance Association, isn't that, this is under 2.0, I thought that's part, like in the requirement in the ordinance, is that correct or incorrect?
That is correct.
Right. We're starting to get hands popping up, so any other questions before we open up for public comment? So I'll start taking public comment. Anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this one, please come up to the microphone. Other people line up behind up, that way moves things along. We have a lot of phone calls too, so go ahead, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Michael Crowley. I'm a partner in the Jansen Law Firm here in Eureka. I live at 2694 Greenwood Heights Drive, very close to where this project is supposed to happen at 2498 Greenwood Heights Drive. I also have been a captain and firefighter with the Neyland Fire Department until very recently for 15 years, which means that I had the opportunity and requirement of my job as a captain and firefighter to drive both fire engines and water tenders up and down Greenwood Heights on a frequent basis. And I'm here to tell you all, if you haven't personally driven on Greenwood Heights Drive, what it's like to drive in this road. driving a fire engine or a water tender on that road, there's no way two vehicles can pass each other going opposite directions. The road's not big enough, the road's in terrible condition, there are no shoulders, parts of it are collapsing on the sides, there's all kinds of water problems on that road where there's potholes, there's all kinds of difficulties with this road. This road is already completely inadequate for the amount of traffic that's already on it. And the idea that we'd have another commercial project with vehicles coming up and down this road, it's not just going to be their employees. They're going to have other commercial trucks come up to provide materials and building things for this project. This road cannot handle that kind of traffic. And if you don't think so, take a drive up there and see for yourself. You will find out very quickly. Number two, this issue about the water, the idea that this project is going to get all of their water from rain catchment, from the moisture and humidity in the air, is a complete fantasy. This county, this state is in the middle of an historic, devastating drought. There is no way they're going to provide the amount of water for this project from rain catchment. They're going to have to use well water. The same people who are trying to get this board to approve this project were the same people that sucked the streams dry for all the folks on Shale Lane and damaged all their pumps and their equipment. And they didn't contribute to the road maintenance agreement anyway. I will note, when I got the notice from the county about this project in May of 2021, the representation in that notice was that this project would use approximately 50,000 gallons of water for irrigation purposes on an annual basis. Now we're being told it's going to use 90,000 gallons of water on an annual basis, almost twice as much as before. And as I said, the idea that they're going to get all this water from rain catchment is a fantasy. Lastly, the school bus stop problem.
30 seconds.
The Freshwater School District has not given consent, and the requirements that apply here require that the school district that has a school bus stop has to agree in writing expressly for that setback to happen. They've not done so. This is dangerous for children. I have 3 kids. My kids went to Garfield. My kids went to Freshwater School. They took buses. This is
Your
not a
time's up,
safe
sir.
situation for the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Mike Watts. I've been on Hill for 47 years, and in approximately 1985, we went through this same thing pretty much. And the county at the time, the parcel size was 2.5. They moved it to 5. The main thing there was they said, the road is in bad shape, it's never going to change, and in 47 years it has not changed, it's gotten worse. And water has always been a big deal there. So that was the main 2 things in 1985 that this board said no more. We'll take the 2.5, we'll move it to 5, and that way that will lower the amount of cars and trucks on the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Ken Younggreen, and I've lived on Shale Lane for 20 years. Shale Lane has a community water system that collects water from my property and pumps it up to a reservoir. And that feeds the 12 houses on Shale Lane. When this operation started, they were taking water from that and depleting it. So they cut them off, so they drilled a well, and now they're taking their water from that. The whole thing about rainwater catchment is a joke. During the summer months, we don't have enough rain for that to even be a factor. Anyway, I'm concerned that they're going to deplete the water table. Late in the summer, the water table drops down, and the amount of available water drops way down for everybody on Shale Lane. The other water issue I have is contamination from agricultural fertilizers. The water catchment area is directly below this piece of property. From my property, I can look up and see the growing plants from there. So every time it rains, there's going to be water working its way down into the water catchment facility and possibly contaminating the drinking water for the other 12 houses on Shale Lane. So that's pretty much my main concern.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Christina Bealey. I'm a local geologist specialized in hydrogeology, and this was brought to my attention because I am doing my graduate thesis research in the Humboldt Bay, and this is in the Freshwater Creek watershed, which is of particular interest to myself. And so I visited the site, and I've seen the spring that the well is adjacent to, and instantly know that this facility will likely be pumping from the well. They say they're not. If they are, it's going to be of detriment to a lot of local shareholders and residents. But also, when we talk about the drainage patterns and the toxins that this could contribute to the local tributaries that go into the Freshwater Creek stream and go directly into the Humboldt Bay, it seems to me that the county would want to question setting precedents that we're going to allow this type of large cannabis cultivation to occur in such environmentally fragile areas that have already taken millions of dollars of funding to try to enact stewardships and restore some of the coho and salmonoid spawning areas. And also, when reviewing the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors resolution for certifying that the environmental impact reports are in compliance, there's a couple of the resolutions that I question if this actual project is in compliance with the hydrology and water quality streamside management ordinance. I know they say there's no nearby streams or lakes, but there are really nearby springs, and there are a specific cautions to be taken into account when it's in connection to some springs and so close to water table recharge zones. And so in particular, as far as the hazardous waste materials, the water quality impacts, the hydrogeology groundwater impacts, the hydrogeology drainage impacts, and the hydrogeology surface water impacts, as well as the hydrogeology and water quality overall, I feel that in this environmentally sensitive area, it would almost be seemingly impossible to come out with no impacts to the watershed. And so I'm curious, because they only have a small paragraph in their environmental impact report addressing water resources, and they insist that they're not going to be pumping from a well that they recently drilled. And they've also been pirating water, and a lot of local neighbors have attested to that. But I also question if their mitigation strategies are going to be able to stand up to mitigating the wetland impacts and the streambed alterations. So I would really encourage the county to overlook these plans, and if they do approve it, please oversee the production at this facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Tori Nunez. I live across the street from this project, and I have had to cut off 30 feet from my well this last year. I had to replace the pump. I'm having, a bunch of water issues, iron bacteria going crazy. So as far as the school bus thing goes, the houses are totally visible from Greenwood Heights Drive. I've had people stop in my driveway and say, hey, is that a fire, when they're running their lights at night? So I think they're being a little dishonest in what they're saying. And that's about all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The speaker that was just, if I heard you wrong, but maybe I did you say you've seen lights on during the nighttime hours there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Next speaker. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Jones. I live at 2185 Greenwood Heights, which is not far downstream from this proposal. And I just wanted to comment that as such, I'm concerned about the effects to the groundwater, because that's my well water. And I'm also curious about, there's been some discussion about monitoring their water use, and I'm wondering, how do you do that, and do you have the resources? And I just have to question the county's ability to actually monitor their water use and what they're taking out of the ground, or what they're trucking in, whatever the case may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, I'm going to go to,
Can I say one more thing?
no, you had your, I'm sorry. I'm going to be consistent with everybody, though. So now we'll go to the phone lines, and the first caller is, well, it was 7108, but 5288. It disappeared.
Well, I'm going to start off. When you have a bad player, which sounds like you have here, there's a tendency in the county to say, well, we want to bring them into compliance. I'm not optimistic that this person would be compliant. So I think as far as if you do move forward in this, and I would actually deny this permit based upon the testimony, that you put a condition in there that he be subject to 24/7, 365 inspections with no notification. Number two, that the well that's been put in there be decommissioned and capped, because it's just too tempting to have that and a little interesting that. The other thing, I looked here like I didn't hear a condition. It looks like you have ancillary use of an excess of 10%. So I have a problem with that. Something doesn't sound right here. It says processing will be performed off-site at a licensed third-party processing facility. So they're going to truck it down there. Then they're going to bring it back to turn it into pre-rolls and other things for manufacturing and distribution. I just don't see that manufacturing and distribution, this is a correct location for it. Regarding the site of a thing from a bus stop, the children, they'll know what's there. And it's just the thought, hey, somebody's over there doing the drugs or making the drugs, the hash or whatever, that we're told to just say no to. So you can't just say if it's out of sight is not necessarily out of mind for the children. You put this there for a reason. Someone wants to go ahead and shorten up the goalpost by 2/3 of what it was supposed to be before for their project. The project doesn't fit within the constraints. So I'm going to say just say no to this project. I really can't see how you can condition it to satisfy the problems that this person potentially will cause within this neighborhood, and it's already caused. If it, like you said, it was a new person who just bought it a year ago and the problems had been before. The person not living on site is my understanding. It's now the area person and just does not fit within this neighborhood, no matter how you condition the project. That's my recommendation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker is Lori Sperry.
Hi, my name is Lori Sperry, and I live up the road from the Shale Lane project that they're proposing. And I guess I have a couple of concerns. And first and foremost, like many of our neighbors, is the water issue. I think over the last 20 years, we've noticed a distinct change in the environment around here as far as the amount of waterfall we get in rain and that type of thing. Our wells have been producing less water every year, kind of progressively. And I notice their issue, they have like almost a 30,000 gallon deficit from their 64,000 gallons proposed catchment versus the 94,000 they think they're going to be using. So that's a concern. And also I feel really somewhat distressed about the traffic on Greenwood Heights as a result of a project like this, as well as the implications resulting around the school bus issue. And I just wanted to say, although I'm not directly close to the actual project itself, I'm about 3 miles up the road, I feel like the impact is going to be a very negative impact for our community. This is a neighborhood of families and people who have lived here as a community. This just doesn't really fit in with what we would like to see on Greenwood Heights. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next caller is Dustin Owens. Okay. I don't know what changed that.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to start out by saying this is within 600 feet of a school bus stop, and it's frankly not even 200 feet away to the greenhouses. The staff report in the executive summary, unfortunately, actually misstate the response of the Freshwater School District. The Freshwater School District response was to recommend denial of the project. If you review page 99 of the staff report, there was actually a recommendation for denial. It's not just them saying that they can't recommend approval. I'd note that section 55.4.6.4.4.1.6 provides that a reduced setback may be provided, quote, with the expressed written consent of the qualified officials or representatives. There is a provision in that code section that allows a lower setback if site conditions show there will be no detrimental impact. However, that's not the case with this particular project. Although you might not be able to see the greenhouses, which is a little bit questionable, directly from the school bus stop, the entrance to the property is 300 feet into Shale Lane, and you can definitely see the greenhouses from there. Every child that uses that bus stop has to walk by that to get to the bus stop. I think it's really rendering the 600-foot setback meaningless if in this circumstance you do grant a reduced setback. I would note that this property is directly upslope from the water source for our community water system that serves my residents and several others. The property is not fully fenced. I'm not sure where that information came from. Their water quality report is from 2017, and it actually misidentifies the location of the closest stream, which is much closer to the cultivation site. It's only 450 feet from the cultivation site as opposed to 800 feet. I'm not sure why they haven't corrected that or changed that or taken that into account. To answer one question that was brought up, the owner of this property and this property actually are part of the Shale Lane Road Association. The issue is that they just don't pay their dues and haven't done so in the past 6 years. With regard to the water theft, I can confirm, having been part of this whole situation, that they in fact installed a 2-inch pipe into our community reservoir, along with an 80 PSI pump that ran it dry, destroyed our water treatment systems. We had to hire professionals to come in to remove it, to replace all the water treatment systems, to fix it, and it cost total
10
about
seconds left.
$15,000. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next caller is Audrey Diker.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? This is Audrey Deeker.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. I live at 186 Shale Lane. I'm actually just about 2.2 miles from the proposed site of the project. And as it's already been spoken of, this is really a residential neighborhood. I have very significant concerns regarding this proposal, and it will affect not only the residents on Shale Lane, but all of the outlying neighboring areas on Greenwood Heights. The three main areas of concern that I have that I can speak to specifically, the first being Nature's Health Group and the owner of the property has not proven to be a good neighbor or steward of the land. Indeed, they did use the site as an unpermitted cannabis grow operation in 2016 and 17 and stole thousands of gallons of water each day from our residential municipal water source. It did cause over $15,000 of funds to repair all of the problems that occurred because of it. And neighbors just had to pony up that money. There was no effort made on the owner's part or Nature's Health Group to acknowledge fault or pay repair costs or any issues like that. So that's a concern for sure. And in fact, all correspondence through letters and phone calls, which I did offer as the Road Maintenance Association and Water Maintenance Association lead, were rejected. We've had many aggressive and unsafe animals in the same property throughout the years. They've chased children and pedestrians walking to and from the bus stop. And while they do not currently reside at this property, guard dogs have been a very consistent addition to workers and tenants on site. It is also not a fenced property. Of course, the water and soil contamination is the second issue that has been spoken of quite a bit this evening. I continue to have those same concerns that harmful things will leach through the soil into our domestic water system that is shared by the other people on my street. Also, the shared water table, if they do draw from their well, which they dug after we discovered the stealing of the water. They drilled the well at that time, and now they're saying they're not going to use it. That seems very curious to me. Finally, the concern is the bus stop. Indeed, there is close proximity to the bus stop, and it is never felt very safe because of their dogs and because of the situation that is there. And children don't always feel safe walking to and from that. And I would say the Freshwater School District has not approved the project, and they have voiced very strong opposition on multiple occasions. So given the history of kind of irresponsibility of the owner and Nature's Health Group, no effort to pay dues, no effort to repair any damages caused, no effort to communicate whatsoever, I strongly urge the Planning Commission to deny this permit and application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next caller, Alex Bowman.
Thank you for letting me speak. I have been a resident of 205 Shale Lane for the last 10 years. I am also the lead psychologist for the Humboldt County Office of Education. I would like to say both. I echo and concur with the concerns already listed by everyone who has preceded me. In terms of the water usage, the water taint that will occur from the chemicals being used, I also want to say that the children on Shale Lane and in the surrounding area are already aware of the presence of this operation, and they are aware because of the behaviors that have been described by speakers previously. That has become more of a consistent aspect of any interactions with the owner or the people who are associated with the work being done on that property. There is no fence. The fence that used to exist is now in pieces and parts, which is a good way to describe the appearance of the property after the owner has been there and apparently doing some kind of effort at improvement that is not visible. I agree that it is visible, depending upon where you're standing from Shale Lane on the property that surrounds the 200 feet adjacent to the bus stop itself. The dogs themselves, when I first encountered one of them, it was filthy. It looked like a stray. I tried to take it in, and it was aggressive. And so I learned that when I then saw random dogs through the neighborhood, that it was going to be a requirement to be on alert. So the safety issues that have been listed and repeated, the eloquence and articulation that has been brought by all of the speakers tonight in their concerns for our community, I cannot see nor understand any alternate to a denial to this project request. And I thank you for allowing me the time to speak.
Thank you. Next caller is Susie Smith.
I may not be at the right time, but I'm calling about the Holgerson subdivision. I was
Wrong project.
unable to log in earlier.
Nope, wrong project. Yeah, it was continued to
June 2nd.
Yes.
So then I can speak at June 2nd?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? Robert Childs.
Oops. Okay. There you go. I'm unmuted now. Hi there. I appreciate the chance to talk tonight. I live 1.5 miles uphill from this permit application, and I've lived here 28 years. I'm a retired science teacher from Eureka High School, and I've been keeping track of our water use the entire time we've lived here because we use rain catchment for our water supply. There's just 2 of us living here, and we use around 15,000 gallons of water per year, and we're very careful with water because of our source. There's 64,000 gallons of water storage is only 4 times what we use in a year. And I totally, of course, understand what do dehumidifiers do, but I'm curious as to what kind of data that anybody has on what they can supply. That wasn't offered to us. And basically, I think given what you've been presented here tonight, I think what we all know is going to happen when they have permit and their well is sitting there with a pump attached to it, what's going to happen with the well and with the water table as a result. And I think we all know what's going to happen with the agricultural runoff also. These people are not good stewards of the land. And so I would strongly prefer that you all turn their permit down. Thank you for the chance to talk.
Thank you. Is anybody else, Backcountry Press?
Good evening. My name is Allison Poklemba, and I live just over a quarter mile downhill from this property. And I just wanted to speak up to echo my neighbors' concerns. I share those as well regarding water usage, obviously, potential contamination in their runoff. This is a area where our wells in our neighborhood continually run dry each summer. I can't imagine that's going to be getting any better considering how our climate is changing. And the idea of having significantly more water potentially being pulled from our water table that we all are really sharing is scary for us. I also have 2 small children. The traffic on our road is already pretty scary. The commentary that Michael gave as the first speaker really spoke to the fantasy there, considering how the road could really support potentially more traffic of deliveries, shipments, et cetera, coming to and from this property. That is not something that we can really handle. So again, just showing support for what my neighbors are saying and requesting that you not approve this permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, seeing no more hands, no more audience, I'm going to close the public comment and bring this back to the commission. So, go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you. So, thank you very much for the public input. The water usage issue is something raised by Commissioner Levy that I'm also concerned with. 4 to 5 cycles per year. I'm not sure that even their estimate is reliable, 90,000 gallons per year. And the argument that they will use dehumidifiers seems, well, a little bit ludicrous, because even with the best dehumidifier, you can get about 9 gallons a day, and that's under optimal humidity conditions. And so if you're getting 9 gallons a day and you're running 4 to 5, let's say they're on the site for 50 weeks running dehumidifiers every day for 50 weeks, then that's 350 days. And so that would be only 3,150 gallons per year per dehumidifier. So 10 dehumidifiers, 31,500 gallons per year. I just did these calculations now, and then that's under ultra optimal conditions. So let's say the best guess might be 10 to 15,000 gallons a year running dehumidifiers under optimal conditions in what is not always at the most humid area. So clearly there's a huge shortfall in terms of water, and amongst all of the other potential issues with this project. So, I mean, if this were to go through at all, it would definitely have to be scaled down a lot to maybe 2 cycles per year. It'd have to be fully fenced and monitored and enforced. I guess the joining of the road association would be a requirement anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments? Go ahead, Thomas.
So I share the water use consumption. The numbers seem off a bit, but maybe there's some new techniques that I'm unaware of out there. Just to get informational, dehumidifiers in cultivation areas, I've seen it more in indoor facilities. A couple indoor facilities, they get hundreds of gallons a day and out of the air, but that's an indoor facility, not a greenhouse, so I don't know that. And they also do collect water when they're harvesting. When they harvest the material, there's a lot of moisture in there, and they gain water there. I'm not saying that's for this project, but just informational out there. I don't know. I'm really, really concerned. I actually wrote a note here. It reminds me of the Costa project before I was on the commission, like the last in-person project or last in-person meeting I ever went to. With that being said, I'm going to sidetrack and maybe go away from the traffic issue. This one's for staff. If there was no cannabis and it was just, I see that they did a large 3-acre conversion, and we heard testimony that they did the zoning down to 2.5 acres. Is there any way that, you know, somehow this parcel could have 2 to 8 homes on it for some sort of affordable housing or something like that? I'm trying to figure out what its developability is for the traffic issue that I heard in public testimony.
If the parcel size is a minimum of 5 acres, then no, it couldn't, I don't think it would support that number of development.
So it could just be 2 residences, an ADU, and so 4 vehicle trips. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion?
I'm ready to make a motion that we deny the application.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second. Is that your actual motion? I mean, I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That you adopt the finding that this would be detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare due to inadequate provisions for water storage and water use, that it has been, there's past concerns with the water use on the site that has resulted in depletion of groundwater reserves, and
Fencing.
cannabis cultivation site or project of this size could have a detrimental effect to the local water resources.
And I'd also like to add, if we're having a lengthy description of why I denied it, the 600 setback is a concern of mine.
The lack of fencing.
Fencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
You should just be able to say no.
I take your point. Is that sufficient to justify a motion to deny? Yes. Okay.
So
Because
you got all that? Because I'm incapable of repeating.
If you trust us, I think we've got your gist.
All right. So we have a motion, second. Thomas, go ahead.
I hear all the concerns. On the other flip side, I'm more on the side of approve with really, really strict, like 1 time, maybe 2 time mess ups, you lose your permit. But there's definitely evidence to go forward with the motion with, I mean, I flagged it, you know, that the water theft is just, that one really red flagged me. So I'm going to vote the other way, but I see why the commission is going where they're going.
Yeah, I'll just say I understand your, you know, I normally would be with you trying to impose strict conditions and see if we can make it better, but in this case, there's just too many problems over too long of a period, and I don't have faith that they will be corrected or followed. So, thanks.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and besides the conditions that we've talked about already, the traffic and micro business being up there, with that road the way that it is, it just doesn't make sense at all to have this permitted up there. So I'm in agreement with the rest of the commission.
Go ahead, Thomas.
So with this vote, it would seem to set a precedent of be a good neighbor, treat your neighborhood well, respect your neighbors' waters, and respect the road. I might have swayed my vote.
All right. So anything else? All right, I'm going to call for the question. Suzanne, roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Levy?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder?
I'm going to go yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. The motion carries 6-0. All right. It's already 7:50. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then get back at it.
I know.
Recording stopped.
G1, Humboldt County Fair Association modification to conditional use permit in the Ferndale area. I'll take a staff report, please.
Okay, we'll get the PowerPoint up while we're waiting. This is Steve Lazar. I'm the planner assigned to this project. I worked on it the first time around, and this is a modification before you tonight. We did provide you with a supplemental at the start of the meeting. It's a revised resolution for the project. And I guess I'll let you know, we have the agent for the applicant on Zoom available if we have any technical questions about the noise study that was completed for the project.
Happy to answer any questions if people have.
Okay.
It's not there.
We're just waiting for the PowerPoint, but I can start, but.
We'll go ahead and do it on, we'll share it on Zoom.
Share it on yours.
Okay.
It's
All right.
right there. How is it showing up? I found it.
No spot.
Do you want me to click it?
Okay. All right, so as I was saying, this is a modification of a use permit. The use permit is for the Humboldt County Fair Association, and it authorizes motorsport events in the form of motorcycle racing and concerts. The events take place at the Humboldt County Fairgrounds. This project last appeared, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So this is a project location map, and this is a bit of an anomaly. This is a project that is on county property located nearly wholly within the city of Ferndale. Jurisdictional immunity applies in cases where a county or city-owned property applies within a different jurisdiction. However, because the original project being the execution of a lease agreement for the Fair Association that allowed certain activities, that's an event under CEQA. To allow us to have a forum for a public discussion, we applied a use permit process to this, even though this is within city limits of the city of Ferndale. And this is just a map showing the Ferndale zoning. You can see that the majority of the property in the city limits is zoned public facility. That's the light blue. This is a map showing the actual fairgrounds and also the track, which is the epicenter of the permit activities. You can see the grandstands. There was like I said, there's two different activities allowed under the permit. There's the concert events and the motorcycle racing events. The concert events occur on a stage. None of that's going to be discussed tonight because that is not a part of the modification. This is a quick timeline, and I'm going to run through these very quickly. We've had a lot of other public comments and other projects ahead of us, so I'm going to go pretty quick tonight. April 2019 was when this was first applied for. It was approved by the Planning Commission in September of 2020. I believe Commissioner Mulder, you're the only one who wasn't at that meeting. So the rest of you should probably have a fairly good memory on that. A timely appeal was filed. It went to the Board of Supervisors, and it was denied. During the approval of the project at the board, they also added some allowances for electric motorcycle racing. In the time since that approval, the November 10th of approval, there has been no events, and we'll get into some of the reasons for that in a minute. And the modification request that we're talking about tonight was applied for at the end of the year, last year. So I'm not going to go through all these. These are the basic nuts and bolts of the noise-related conditions that are applied under the permit. You can see here in the underline, that's what was added by the Board of Supervisors after the Planning Commission first considered this. So it basically boosts the number of events to 4 per year in the event that they want to have events that are exclusively electric motorcycles. So, so basically, the permit allows 5 concerts and 2 conventional gas-powered motorcycle racing events and 2 additional events if electric. There's requirements for measuring the noise at the tailpipe for all participating motorcycles, and a condition was applied and a mitigation measure restricting that to 90 decibels. That is the source of the modification request tonight. There's a CNEL, or a community noise equivalent level restriction on noise over a 24-hour period that applies to both concerts and motorcycle events, and they're set differently. But the one that applies in the case of the motorcycle racing events is 63 decibels. These pictures show some racing that occurred in, I think, 2018 or 2017. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then we have some mitigation measures for fugitive dust control. Concerts, I'm not going to talk about. Like I said, that's not the subject of the permit modification, so we're going to go past that. All events have to be over by 10. Lighting has to be kept within the boundaries of the property, and a traffic management plan has to be prepared and submitted to Public Works prior to holding events. The monitoring requirements of the permit require that each year the planning department gets told about the events that are scheduled to occur and gets a report on the events that are held in the preceding year. And the purpose of that is to see whether the mitigation measures are working effectively, the noise levels are consistent with what was projected and estimated by the noise consultant. And so that's an exercise that really hasn't been conducted yet because there's been no events that have occurred. The modification, like I was saying, is to raise the instantaneous noise limit from 90 decibels to 99 decibels. This is a measurement at the tailpipe of the motorcycle, and it would occur before any racer would be allowed to participate in a motorcycle event. The noise limit needs to be raised because it's been too restrictive. They've been contacting event promoters who have all backed away once they learned of that restriction. It's inconsistent with the noise study, and it was an error by staff, and I'll explain that later as I walk through the noise study. And when I say staff, I mean me, just to be clear. These are just slides that are just illustrating that there is an environmental baseline here. There's a lot that's happened at the fairgrounds over the years. Many of us are familiar with it as a venue for the annual county fair, but it's a venue for so many other things, and it's been doing this since 1870. And then since 1896, it was the exclusive location for the fair. The fair was in Ronerville and other places before that. Other things that occur, these are just instances of situations. You can see up in the top, those are all concerts that occurred between 1996 and 2011. On the right, you can see a discussion about horse races, bands, circuses. This is in 1925. There was actually motorsport events in 1947 and 54 involving cars, I guess I couldn't try to think of the name, but yeah. Anyways, it's had a vibrant assemblage of uses. And then just another example of these types of uses that's used during the Tour of the Unknown Coast, graduation events, carnivals, all these things that you might imagine. So moving past that, a 2-day monster truck event was held in 2017. Not popular. We heard a lot about that during the first permit. In fact, when the Planning Commission first considered this, right at the hearing date, the applicant, the Fair Association, decided we're not going to do the monster trucks. That was obviously not popular. Other events that occurred was something called the Humboldt County Half Mile, and that was the pictures you saw earlier. That was a race, a sort of clandestine race, before it was understood better that there needed to be a consideration of this. And that led to the community kind of outcry, led to the decision of the board to require that we do a CEQA review and a public process for this. And that's what happened the first time around. That's what precipitated that. And in 2018, the noise study was done for the original permit, and it was done by a local consulting firm, Whitchurch Engineering, who's on the call, and it did testing, and we'll get into those details in just a moment. The noise analysis that we used for this project the first time around and tonight is based on the general plan and how our general plan addresses noise. And general plan specifically identifies the fairgrounds as a stationary noise source, just given the history of uses and ongoing noise. 2 types of noise sources in this case. We're not going to talk about concerts. We're going to talk about the motorcycle racing. This is the CEQA checklist. This is the operative question when it comes to noise. It does look to the general plan. It specifically says, in excess of standards established in the local general plan. So we're in the right place when we're looking at our noise element. the noise section of our general plan. There's a lot in the general plan about noise, but the important part to keep in mind, what you see in the top is a table that talks about noise over a 24-hour period on a regular basis, a daily noise source. The Royal Gold project that we'll be bringing before you in a couple, maybe 6 weeks, that has everyday noise that we would use that table to evaluate. There's also restrictions on short-term noise that apply based on the different zonings, and those restrictions tap out at 65 decibels. However, specifically in the general plan is an exception section that makes allowances for certain activities. Generators are one, things that are on a temporary basis, including temporary events with a conditional use permit. So the idea being that the use permit is the forum by which the decision-making body determines what's an appropriate noise level, what's the necessary mitigation that gets applied, and that was done the first time around, and we're revisiting that tonight. So, community noise equivalent level, this is a kind of a bizarre concept, but it needs to be understood when you consider this project because that's central to our analysis. It is an average, it's taken over a 24-hour period, and there's weighting given to noise generated during the late in the evening from 7 o'clock to 10 p.m. and from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. This is just an example of how you would calculate community noise equivalent. You would look at each 1 hour segment, you would come up with basically an hourly average, you'd crunch all those numbers, and what you come out with is your CNEL. So you can't take an instantaneous measurement and know what CNEL is. You have to look at the 24-hour period. So this is showing where the noise testing was done. There was two specific locations. One was the parking lot near the high school, and one was on Arlington Avenue on a vacant lot. This is where the noise consultant did study noise at the track to try to come up with conclusions in support of the project. When looking at that, this is just showing how they established the ambient noise, because there are times during the day that the project's not having noise, and that's part of the 24-hour calculus. So they took ambient noise measurements from 2 to 4 and from 8 to 10. Additional noise measurements, what we call the exceedance testing, these were done in service of finding out how loud it is when the actual racing occurs. And the methodology for that was through measuring noise, and you can't really see them, but up on the top right, I tried to draw three motorcycles. So the idea is they had 3 people on motorcycles racing around the track for a period of time, and they collected the noise during that time, and they used that to extrapolate how noisy it was at these 2 locations where they monitored from. Then they used an equation where they multiplied the 3 into 18, which is the maximum that you could have in a heat, and that was to extrapolate what would actually be the worst case scenario during a motorcycle race. What you see here is the 46 was the minimum value at the Arlington Avenue site, 85.6 was the maximum encountered during the testing, and when you adjust that maximum from 3 to 18, you get 93.4. So that's bumping it up for the larger number of riders. Additionally, what you do, remember what I was saying earlier, noise is calculated based on a 24-hour period, so each noise measurement is averaged over a 1 hour block. So the equivalent noise based on the average of all the noise measurements taken during the testing was 69.6 at those 2 locations. Well, at the Arlington Avenue, it was a little higher on Arlington Avenue, a little lower on the high school spot. But basically, considering all those noise levels, they got to around 70 decibels was what the total averaged out noise was from the low to the high. So these are a couple things to keep in mind when they did this study. They assumed continuous racing conditions. Basically, the noise levels experienced during that testing would be duplicated from 2 o'clock until 10 o'clock, the entire window where racing could occur. They didn't try to break it out into chunks or anything like that. And they also looked at the duplication of I talked about that, the 3 to 18. They offered some mitigation measures, possibly to lower the CNEL, and one of them was reduce the number of people in a heat. The other was end the events earlier in the evening. Neither of those were selected. The one that went with was exhaust system treatments, and what you see in the bottom right slide is what the CNEL becomes when you apply a full exhaust system treatment. This is baffles and applying specialized exhaust system components that dramatically reduce engine noise. And this was brought to the Planning Commission the first time around, and this was pledged to by the applicant, and this is what we were using for our conditions. So This is why we have an error. The testing that was done at Arlington Avenue and at the parking lot at the high school. The testing resulted in the measurements that we used to apply our tailpipe noise restriction. There's the 90 decibel restriction. What we assumed was that because we didn't have measurements from the noise consultant right at the bike, we had them at locations where there was attenuation over distance, we had to try to come up with a number that we thought would be representative of how loud a bike would be without a specialized muffler. We used 105 decibels. And the reason we used that is because the AMA rulebook says that you can't exceed 105 decibels if you participate in a race. So it seemed like a reasonable way to go, but what we should have done is circle back with the noise consultant to find out. When we did, we learned that they back calculated from the original data, and they determined that the noise from a single motorcycle at the tailpipe would have been 123 decibels. That's, almost 20 decibels higher. That's not a small amount. And so when you look at our staff assumption, 105 decibels with an assumed noise reduction of 15 based on what those presented in the noise study, that you could get at least 15 to 20 decibels of attenuation by using these special mufflers, that's how we got to 90. So we're bringing this back before you because that's a change in the conditions of approval. That's a change in the mitigation measures, albeit a change that's based on an error that was a misunderstanding of the noise levels. And so that does mean that we have to reconsider those things under CEQA. And we have done that to the extent that we've prepared a supplemental mitigated negative declaration. It exclusively focuses on the noise section of the checklist because that's the only thing that's up for discussion under the proposed changes. And we believe that the change does not create new potential impacts not yet analyzed. It doesn't create a need for a different analysis or change our conclusions because, as I mentioned, this general plan is the standard for evaluating the project's noise. There is no clear violation of a threshold of significance. The concerts have mitigation measures that are already committed to. The only thing we're changing is the instantaneous motorcycle noise limit in the noise mitigation measures for motorcycle racing. The 63 and 73 decibel CNEL restrictions that are also built into the permit conditions don't need to be changed because they're based on the noise data that was used from the noise study. The only thing that needed to be changed is the condition applied by staff. In addition to the mitigation measures that were initially agreed to and are built into the permit, the applicant did some soul searching and they found that there were some additional things they could consider offering in service of trying to reduce the event-related noise, and those are some effectively a sound barrier created through use of either straw bales or strategically positioned tractor trailers, semi-trucks. And remembering, of course, I know it was a while ago when I said this, we're talking about 2 events a year. So, these are kind of short-term kinds of mitigation scenarios. And the last one is a more permanent treatment, which would be specialized materials placed at the back of the grandstands to lower the reflection from noise that hits it during the events. And these are not things that are unknown. They actually have that at Redwood Acres. So we provided you a supplemental tonight. There's nothing groundbreaking in there. We just tightened a few things up to clarify more of the basis for our technical error, because frankly, we were still trying to figure out exactly what went wrong, but we've kind of landed on what that is now. And we gave you a track changes version with strikeouts where we amended things and underlines, mostly explaining the basis for why we did a supplemental mitigated negative declaration. We're recommending approval because the project is a good candidate for an exception to the short-term noise standards. It should be noted that that CNEL, that 24-hour table that I showed earlier, it breaks out noise levels into normally clearly acceptable, normally acceptable, normally clearly unacceptable, and in between there's a normally unacceptable, and this 63 CNEL is in the normally unacceptable. But remember, there's an exception to that. But even if we didn't use the exception, the general plan still says if you're in that range, you might be unacceptable, but you also might not be. It depends on kind of attitudes. So we believe that the project deserves to be modified as requested. We take responsibility for the error, and we think that the conditions of approval effectively allow for us to monitor the success of the mitigation measures and ensure that the permit is operated consistent with the conditions of approval. And therefore, my suggested motion for you to consider is listed up there, and I'm available to answer questions. You always have the option of denial or requiring that we do additional environmental analysis, or consider incorporating additional mitigation measures or operational restrictions. And with that, I will turn it over to you guys for any questions.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Just transparency, way back, I don't have exact memory, way back in September 2020, but I do believe I made comment on this project back in 2020, and I did follow it through the Board of Supervisors, and so just being transparent.
Any other questions before we open it up for public? Seeing none, I'll open up public comment. Anybody that wishes to speak on this, please come up to the podium. I suggest you line up so it'll save time.
Excuse me. Good evening, commissioners. Jay Russ, Ferndale. I'll give you a little background. I've been connected to this project since about 2015. I'm a motorcycle racer, and some friends and I who race brought this to the Fair Board or Fair Association and said, hey, this would be a really great use of the track when it's not being used for horse racing. It's really rare to be able to race on a half-mile track. We were racing in rodeo arenas, and it's just a real treat. And that doesn't just go for locally, that goes for statewide. I mean, to be able to race on a half mile, and not to mention the timing of the event in the summer when the rest of the state is really hot. People love to come to Humboldt County, and that was proven in 2017. 2017, I raced in that event, and it was a huge success. It was the first time it'd been offered. We had around 1,400 through the gate at admissions, and you can see from the public comment all the signatures that we've gathered to support this change, because the community wants to see it happen, other than some folks that are concerned in the nearby neighborhoods. And I understand their concern, I do. And our goal is to actually be a good neighbor to them. But we still, regardless, we still really want to hold this successful event again. So I think it's a lot to wrap your head around, this noise difference. And your mind wants to create this comparison between the 90 decibels and the 99, which is a large increase in sound. But the reality is the sound comparison needs to be to the Whitchurch sound study, because unfortunately no sound recording at the fair property lines was recorded during the 2017 event, but it was simulated in the follow-up sound study conducted by Whitchurch. I was one of the participants. I rode the same bike I raced on. It's a motorcycle you can buy at Pacific Motorsports. It's an off-road motorcycle. It's a motocross bike. You convert it to flat track by suspension and tire changes. It had an aftermarket muffler on it. Contrary to some of the public comment that I read, there were no bikes in the event that ran without mufflers. Every bike had to go through tech inspection before the race. There was not an individual direct sound test as what we're talking about.
You have 10 seconds, so you have to
and anyway, the real comparison is to the Whitchurch sound study versus the 99. And I think Steve or Steve did a good job of explaining, where that error lies. So I hope you support the modification. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Glenn Zemer. My wife, Catherine, was recruited by the Fair Board to be the interim administrator from November of 2021 through November of 2020 through November 21. And in the other duties as assigned part of my marriage contract, I ended up partnering with her on certain aspects of managing the fair. The CUP review was something, quite frankly, that I did initially for her, and she and I worked on it together. And the CUP was approved just literally days before she began to work for them. So when we arrived at the office, we found a copy of it laying on the desk. So I took it home and I started to read it real quickly, and it became obvious when I read the CUP that although everybody was well-intentioned, the fact of the matter was it was basically useless because there was no way that the fair was going to be able to create any events that would meet the conditions required in the CUP. You know, if that was the determination of the community, then so be it. But it seemed like the intent of the community was trying to reach kind of a neutral ground. Let's acknowledge that motorcycle racing is not everybody's cup of tea, and that certainly, you know, is the case for any other activity that goes on at the fairgrounds. There's a contingency group that likes any event, and there's a contingency group that doesn't think you should have any event. And that's certainly the case here, and the testimony you've received in a written form speaks to that. The point that I think is most telling in this whole discussion is the fair is not asking you to change the net effect on the community, which is the CNEL. The CNEL that's identified in the CUP is only 2 decibels above the ambient level that exists in that community on any day and age. These events would be 2 days out of 365 a year, so it's obviously a very short-term exposure. I don't want to stand before you and say there won't be people in the community that are irritated, but the standard for consideration of what we do as a society isn't, is there one person out of 15,000 that's irritated? The standard is, does this project meet the goals and the requirements and the limitations we as a society has set on this type of activity? And I think the fair can say with good intent and in all honesty that they really believe this will. Even if you were to grant this modification, the requirements that these events be monitored professionally and that the reporting of that, existence of that event will be a yes or no, whether all this extrapolation of engineering is really worth anything. I think we all understand and are sophisticated enough to know that you can buy an engineer to tell you anything you want to hear. But the simple fact of the matter is, as we stand before you tonight, these are extrapolations. They are done in good intent and good effort. But again, I wanted to stress that the fair is not asking that the effect on the community to be modified. The fair is only asking for permission to run the event in a manner that allows us to determine down the road, can we in fact meet the community standards and expectations of this planning commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wants to get up and speak?
My name is Jennifer Raymond, and I'm a neighbor. And I want to first address the general plan noise element that Mr. Lazar referred to. And one of the purposes of that is to prevent incompatible activities. And putting motorcycle races in the center of a residential community is an incompatible activity. All over California, we have problems with racing versus residents. The problem arose because the residential communities have moved to the areas where the races, which used to be on the outskirts, used to be all by themselves, and now the neighbors have moved in and they're complaining. We already live there, and we do not want this kind of noise in our residential community. Furthermore, Mr. Lazar referred to the error that he made, and the error occurred because we do not have good, firm data on what kind of noise will be generated by motorcycle races. We have 3 bikes that ran around the track and 2 monitors, nothing professional, nothing based on acoustical engineers doing the studies. And then lots of extrapolations to prove that you could meet the requirements. We need factual data. That's what an EIR is for. That's why they're required. And I am asking the commission to demand that there be an EIR for the noise generated by these races. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience here that wants to speak before I go to the phone? All right. Next speaker will be caller 5288. You're breaking up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, why don't you try recalling us? You're really broke up. It's like staticky. Call back. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak while he calls back? He will.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nate Madsen. I was not planning on speaking on this item, but as a motorcycle enthusiast, I would encourage you to support it. I am sympathetic to the neighbors' concerns, and I do hope that there is a way to mitigate that to some degree, but there's not really a place in our community for motorcycle races, and I think that this would be a good use, and given it's only 2 times a year, seems appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak on this?
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you. My name is Stephen Avis. I'm a retired land use planner. I'd like to talk to you about 3 things. The first is the magnitude of your decision that you're making tonight. 99 decibels is twice as loud as 96 decibels. 96 decibels is twice as loud as 94 decibels. 93 decibels is twice as loud as 90 decibels. So you have a logarithmic scale, so it's not like a speedometer rating. So that brings it to 9 times louder than what is originally was permitted at 90 decibels. That is a significant change. That is a significant increase. And any significant increase in conditions warrants further review. One of the responsibilities of the lead agency, in this case the county, is provide guidance to the applicant so that they can successfully complete their application and the process of what the project they're doing. In this case, the county is not providing them any guidance on how to mitigate the noise that is going to be there. They're simply trying to tell us that they don't need to mitigate noise, that it's okay to have that much noise in the community. The motorcycles will be tested for 99 decibels at the soundtrack when they first race, but they will be going full throttle around the racetrack. So that's going to be moving around completely. The reason that the county has chosen not to provide them with proper mitigation measures that they do for every other project you have is that they don't have the adequate data. For some reason, they have not chosen to get adequate acoustical data from engineers, acoustical engineers who are trained in how to record noise. Civil engineering is a great field, but it is not acoustical engineering. And anybody going out with a decimeter to listen to noise is fine, but they're not experts in that field. Making calculations based on things you learned in school is fine, but not related to real-life experience that traffic engineers and acoustical engineers use all the time to understand that. This is a big change in the city of Ferndale, right across from residential areas. We said we would live with 90 decibels. We didn't appeal that further to the Board of Supervisors. But this is a big change. This needs additional review, and a fair argument can be made that this is needed for acoustical engineering advice on how to better bring the noise down. Because if they can't pass the tests, professional motorcycle races won't come. They don't want to come where they just maybe guinea pigs, maybe let's see if this works or doesn't work. They want to have contracts over year after year after year so they can come back each year. And if we can't meet it once, they're not going to come back. Why would they even want to come once as the first time? So I urge you to take this back or reject it or ask for a further environmental review. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, caller 7454. Go ahead, 7454. I'm not hearing you, but I can see that you're talking. No, he's...
You want me to try again?
There you go. Now you're...
Or not?
There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kent Sawatsky. I think it's in the public's best interest to go ahead and approve this as is. You probably have a condition, and I wasn't able to listen to all of them, that this will be reviewed after 1 year. If the science or the acoustical people that want to have address this thing shows that it's not viable, then of course, then you can make a determination. So that's all I would say. It's a very small experiment, if you want to call it that, but I understand that I have confidence that the people in the area, I mean, part of what I was trying to explain before was there's always been a thing like if you live by a feedlot, you know, you expect to live by a feedlot. A lot of people bought the houses that didn't. Some of these people have lived there for a long time, but they knew they lived by a public facility, the fairground down there, and there are expectations that once in a while they're going to have a little bit of negativity, possibly in their opinion. Other people would not have a problem with it. So I strongly recommend that you move forward this, and I'm hoping it's conditioned to be reviewed after a year, and if it's found to be negligent in some way, that you can try and mitigate further. Thank you for my opportunity to speak on this one.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? Jim Stretch, go ahead. Star 6 to unmute. All right. Anybody else? He can't seem to.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Should I turn up my volume or
You're fine.
am I okay?
You're
okay,
fine.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as has been mentioned, 100 years ago, the fairgrounds was way out in the country, and so one might expect off-road motorcycle racing events would occur there without a problem. But, you know, has been mentioned today, as anyone that visits Ferndale knows, the residential neighborhoods of the city have grown out to and around that fair property. And who could have foreseen that today the largest parcel of vacant residential zoned acreage in the city, where the city is going to grow, is located directly across the street from the racetrack. Now, neighbors in the community fully accept noise and traffic from the fair, concerts, horse racing, all of the activities that occur there, but they didn't bargain on a motorcycle racetrack across the street or in the neighborhood. An activity 9 times louder than was previously approved. Now, you may not know, but in the interest of working with the Fair Association, the group in Ferndale suggested the alternative approach to granting a permanent CUP, which was to issue a limited permit for 1 or 2 races for the purpose of collecting data, testing mitigations, basically gathering empirical information. That would have been a good idea. And we sincerely wanted to get the yes on this proposal with the fair, but unfortunately the proposal was rejected by the county. And, you know, I think that was a lost opportunity. So we're not unreasonable people, but we do want to know what the proposed activities, how they will affect us on a personal level and how they will affect our properties. Motorcycle racing immediately adjacent to a person's property can have a substantial impact on their lives and property. And surely a new use like this will become a disclosable requirement when a person wants to sell. And it probably will have a negative impact. All that we know now, all that we have to rely on really is in terms of noise and mitigation relative to this proposal is found in the noise study, which is prepared by the applicant's local civil engineer. Unfortunately, there are no
You have 10 seconds.
acoustical engineers in the county. An expert in the field has reviewed
I'm sorry,
that
but your
noise.
time is up. Thank you. I'm trying to be fair to everybody. All right. So is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this item? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment and bring this back to the commission. So go ahead, Thomas.
So I heard some testimony about this being a new use, but that makes me question. I swear I heard that there was races, and I've not only tonight, but I've heard it elsewhere that there was races dating back to the 40s. Is that correct or incorrect?
Through the chair. There were races, there were stock car races, that's what I couldn't think of. But they were periodic. It wasn't like an annual type of thing, but it isn't without precedent. So CEQA does require considering a baseline to think of all the things that have occurred and try to set the baseline based on the range of activities and uses. And so it's relevant, but it's not coverage. That's why we're doing this process.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not positive, but I believe there's been multiple other motorcycle races. I can remember when I was a kid, there being races out there. I didn't race, but I can remember going out to them. So I know there's been other. That was a long time ago. So, yeah. Melanie?
I feel the same way about this as last time when it came before us. And, you know, we're talking about a couple of days a year. I live nearby Redwood Acres. I'm not a fan personally myself, but I don't, you know, you have to live in a diverse community and accept that, you know, other people like to do other things on a few other days of the year. And I think that we should all appreciate the tourism that it brings into Humboldt County. And then just in terms of the noise issue that we're looking at today, I mean, as some of the callers said on both sides, it's a logarithmic scale. So that means that it also attenuates really, really quickly. So the 100 decibels goes down to 94 after 1 meter and so on and so forth. The max distance, you can even hear it, is 16 meters. And I understand that there are different circumstances and that's not always exactly that. But looking up some data from other races, like stock car races, which we do have precedents for here, it's 96.5 to 104 dBA at 46 meters, which is 150 feet, and then 99 to 109 at 6 meters, which is 20 feet. And so I don't see that it's a significant impact personally, and I'm in favor of adopting the findings in resolution number 22. And I can make a motion to that effect.
I'll second it.
Okay, Thomas, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, if she made that a motion, I'd second it, but Peggy already beat me to it.
All right.
Okay, well, in that case, I will adjust it to formally adopt the findings in.
I think Steve wants to say
Yeah,
something.
through the chair. Just want to point out, we did provide a revised resolution, so if you could just reference that in your motion, everything should be fine.
I have it right here, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Adopt the findings set forth in this resolution, which is number 22. Adopt the proposed supplemental mitigated negative declaration in attachment 2 as required by section 15074B of the CEQA guidelines, including the proposed revisions to the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, finding that there is no substantial evidence that the proposed project will have a significant effect on the environment, and conditionally approve the use permit modification for the Humboldt County Fair Association based upon the findings and evidence and subject to the conditions of approval attached hereto as attachment 1 and incorporated herein by reference.
Thank you, Melanie. And who was the second on that? Was it Peggy? All right. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Mike.
I don't have a discussion. How about just a comment? I know that with this proposal, there are annual reviews on this, and it shows here, 5 annual reviews. And I think gathering that information will be important to see there, but I'm in agreement with the motioner and what we've seen so far tonight and heard before. So thank you.
Go ahead, Thomas.
The other thing in support is economic viability for the county. I think part of land use for the other commercial activities that we do is for economic diversity and viability. So I think this is another great thing. I mean, I think we heard 1,400 people, and I mean, I know lots of people from all over the state and other states that came in for that, a half mile on the coast in the middle of the heat. So I'm in support.
Yeah, I feel the same way. A lot of people made comments to, that effect, and that everybody has different things that they like to do. But when it comes to motorcycle racing, we used to have a lot of places. We had races here locally, couple down on the Eel River, sometimes at Redwood Acres. And I don't know if they still are doing them there, but I think they did have one last year. But this is one of the few places that you can still do it. I just don't understand why this is even really coming before us, to be honest with you. And I'll ask the question, if you move into a place and it's near you have to assume that there's going to be some noise coming from a community place like this where these kind of things happen. I mean, I think it's crazy that this is for the benefit of everybody, not just a few. So there'll be things that maybe some people will enjoy more than others, but it just seems like, this is the right place to have it, so I'll be supportive of it. All right. Any further discussion?
No, I'm the daughter of a race car driver and the sister of a motorcycle racer, and I spent a lot of time going to races as a kid, and it didn't harm me, and I don't think that they had probably mufflers like they do now. And sound is part of the thrill of the races, and so I don't think it's 2 times a year. I mean, I went to more races than that in 1 year, and I think it's good for the county. And they have to have revenue to support the fair, or the fair will shut down. I think they've already brought that up the last time we discussed this.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Suzanne, roll call vote.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner O'Neill. Yes. Commissioner Mulder.
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver.
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
Yes.
Commissioner Levy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries 6-0. All right. Yeah. All right. Got through another one. So let's move on to item number G2. If I can turn the page. With Bowden Wood, Garberville area. Should be fun too.
Good evening. My name is Michael Holterman, and I'm the planner assigned to application 15218 for Bowden Wood. If we could pull up the presentation.
Is your mic on? It seems quiet. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that any better?
A little
A
bit.
little. The mic is your friend.
Is this any better?
Yes, that was better.
Okay, I'll try to keep this distance. Okay, so as I said, this is the application 2 special permits for Bowden Wood, application number 15218. That's APN 222-071023 in the Garberville area. Next slide. That would be nice. Okay, so briefly some project overview. The application is for 43,000 square feet of outdoor cannabis cultivation. That's broken into 21,260 square feet of new outdoor and 21,740 square feet of existing outdoor. The application is also for 4,200 square feet of pertinent propagation space. Processing activities include drying in a 700 square foot drying shed existing and a proposed 1,800 square foot processing facility. The energy source is solar power with a backup generator, and the water source is a 538,000 gallon rainwater catchment pond, and the total water use is approximately 385,000 gallons annually. Here is the site map. In the bottom middle, that's pre-existing cultivation, and in the upper left, Also pre-existing cultivation. The large block to the right is a mixture of pre-existing that was relocated and new. There is a pond in the upper right corner. That's the one that was included in the description. And then this is kind of addressing the issue of NSOs. So first, a few quotes from the biologist that submitted a report and some clarifying emails. I believe you may have looked at the report as of the last hearing, but just to reiterate, so the first quote is, quote, given the lack of detections inside this area, it is reasonable to conclude that the proposed cannabis cultivation will not impact NSOs in a manner that violated state or federal law, end quote. For the second is, quote, this locality was not classified as habitat due to the absence of trees. Reviewing the site and the areas adjacent, I have concluded that no spotted owl nesting, roosting, or foraging habitat will be removed as a result of this project, end quote. And the third is, furthermore, given measures to mitigate noise disturbance and light pollution, this proposed cannabis cultivation is unlikely to impact any existing NSO that may be located on adjacent parcels or within 1.3 miles of proposed new cultivation in existing grasslands. So really this question is regarding the mitigation measures that were included in the EIR for pre-existing cultivation and for new cultivation. So as far as pre-existing cultivation goes, if there are NSO activity centers within 0.7 miles, that triggers this mitigation measure, which includes a report from a qualified biologist that would determine whether take would occur or whether or not the project could be modified or operate without take of the species. Which brings me to the quote that we had just covered earlier, the first quote, that the proposed cannabis cultivation, will not impact NSOs in a manner that violated state or federal law, which would include take. As far as new cultivation, really only one part of this is applicable to this project, and that would be the first point. But I did want to include the other sections because it is somewhat of a step process. So the first point is in areas where new cultivation is proposed, where within 1.3 miles of an NSO observation, as well as within NSO habitat, the next mitigation measures will need to be followed. Those include a biologist doing 2-year protocol level surveys, which then, if NSOs have been determined to be on site, it is determined that habitat removal would constitute take, and so no new cultivation would be allowed. Alternatively, if northern spotted owls are determined to be absent 1.3 miles, no further mitigation is required. So this is the section that's kind of operative in the new cultivation. If the area of proposed new development is within suitable habitat for northern spotted owl, that would be why I included the quotes from the biologist that stated that the area was not classified as habitat and that the cannabis cultivation is unlikely to impact any NSO within 1.3 miles of proposed development. If it's not NSO habitat, then the remaining mitigation measures aren't required. So given that, staff recommendations include that the Planning Commission find the project consistent with the EIR for the CCLUO, make all the required findings for approval of the special permits, and as a note, if the Planning Commission believes that the area of new cultivation is suitable NSO habitat, staff recommends that the Planning Commission only approve the pre-existing cultivation. And adopt the resolution approving the Bowdenwood project as recommended by staff, subject to the recommended conditions. Staff have prepared an alternate resolution if the Planning Commission so decides. An additional condition of approval would need to be added to reduce the cultivation, or rather propagation space, to limit it to 10% of the pre-existing cultivation. That's all, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, well, thank you. I should note that I I was absent from the meeting last month, I guess it was, or the month before when this came up initially, but I did review the video shortly after that. And then when I saw it on the agenda for today, I reviewed again just earlier today the section of that meeting when this was discussed because what I was reading in the staff report didn't jive with my memory. And so when I saw it again, I confirmed my memory that during the last discussion of it, Director Ford intervened at some point when we'd been discussing whether or not the mitigation measures were being followed and were applicable to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but basically to say that given what you were hearing, given what had come before the commission, you were recommending that we continue this to allow for owl surveys to be done. That was what I thought you said, and perhaps I misunderstood what you were saying, but I was confused because that did not occur then prior to this revisiting of the issue.
Certainly not, you're correct. It could have been interpreted, I suppose, that I said owl surveys. I don't recall that was my thinking at the time. The thing that was troubling to me is that information we received to that point had indicated that the cultivation was not within NSO habitat. And there was some conversation or discussion by the biologist at the meeting that indicated that it was, I believe he said, foraging habitat, which would be habitat.
Yes.
And so what I had intended was we need to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's either habitat or it's not. And habitat is foraging, roosting, or nesting.
Yes. So you're saying that, just if I want to understand what you're saying. What you thought he might be saying was that indeed it could be habitat, and if that was what he was saying, it would require surveys to be done. But in his subsequent testimony in writing, he affirmed that he feels it's not habitat, or where are we with that issue now?
Well, I think where it was left with the applicant and with their specialist is that he wanted to have an opportunity to come and clarify that to the commission. And that's really where we are tonight.
I see. So where we are tonight is pretty much where we were last time, but he's going to speak more about it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Thomas.
Sorry, you gotta hit the button a couple times to make it work, kind of like the phone callers. Just commenting about this email that's a supplemental that has a couple blurry pictures of an owl. But it's honestly, has staff analyzed this to determine whether this is a barred owl or a spotted owl? Because there's a couple of these grainy photos that the barred owl and the spotted owl are so similar in looks that I've accidentally mistaken a barred owl for a spotted owl until a professional was brought in. So.
The photographs were referred to the biologist. He indicated that it was likely a barred owl, but that given the quality of the photographs, it was not possible to be conclusive. Excuse me. That being said, again, the issue is not presence. Rather, in this case, it's if it is in fact habitat.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Mike? Oh, I thought you were. Okay. Melanie? Yep. So we're going to open up public comment then, and hopefully the biologist will be one of the callers. So public 5288, start with. Oh, is he? Okay, I didn't know.
I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I just have a general question. It sounds like you have a picture of a spotted owl or a barred owl close to this situation. My understanding is they both feed on the same kind of food, and so if there's a tendency for one to be there, there's a possibility the other could be there as far as habitat for foraging. Don't know if that's true or not, and I guess maybe the expert can correct me if they eat different things or if they what menu they have, but it just seems to be if you have one kind of owl there that's very similar, they can't tell the difference between. Most likely, the other owl could also live in that particular situation. That's my only comment on this particular project. I still would like to see maybe because of the potential discrepancies here and things to come to a county's the county to basically hire or somebody that the county hires to make an additional second opinion, get a second opinion on this one. If there's any kind of chance that all, as we've discussed before, sometimes things happen, but I think a second opinion might be warranted under this circumstance. Thank you for my opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you. 7429.
Okay, good evening. This is Roby Tenorio, and I think this plan did come before your commission. I believe it was April of 2021. I don't believe it just happened last month. The applicant's wildlife biologist, Troy Leopardo, he did state at that meeting that he thought it was unfair to apply spotted owl rules to agriculture and that cannabis is agriculture. But that brings up the idea of kind of location. This cannabis is agriculture, but it's going into an area that has not been traditionally agricultural area. It's a traditionally forested area with some rare and necessary open prairie, just definitely not traditional agricultural area. And in the last 20 years, we've had a boom of cannabis into forested area, and that is having of impacts on forest and those open prairie wildlife dependent species. And I know CDFW was very concerned about that. That was a big push for trying to legalize it, and it was not expanding the grows that were out in the forested areas. The noise impacts, when you start with a base decimal measurement that's arrived at by testing on a windy day, that's kind of a distorted basis to count from. Wind is loud, and wind is a noise owls know and have lived with and evolved with, and it's not windy all the time. So it's hard to equate those noises just on a decibel reading. And when they look for owls, they do a thing called hooting to get them. I don't know that was done. Decibels have an unusual measuring system. Commissioner McCaver referred to it in your last agenda item, but normal conversations around 60, and then anything louder than 85 can cause hearing loss. So it's not just 1, 2, 3, it increases that way. So distance, of course, is important, and also the sensitivity of whoever is hearing it, specifically in this case the wildlife. And owls are dependent on sound clues for their survival. So there's a reason that these measurements are done, and there's a reason why these have been put into the ordinance. So I don't think we have to we have to look at this further, and I agree that there should be a little bit more investigation and not just rely on one expert. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Holy cow.
Hi, my name is Vanessa again, and I'm the consultant on this project, and I also have Troy Leopardo with me as well today. I just want to speak to a couple things they said, though, first, to clear up a few things. My handwriting's really messy. In that, we did do a decibel meter reading on this property. We did a sound attenuation thing like Steve Lazar just talked about for the previous project, and it is less than 50 decibels at 50 feet from the generator shed. So it is not going to be an issue. You can't really hear it at all. As far as the experts go, we've actually had 3 experts out on this property. We had an original wildlife biologist that did a biological recon, and then we were pulled from the zoning administrator hearing in April of last year because Fish and Wildlife had determined about the 1.3 mile thing not really being addressed in all the permits in the county, right? So we were pulled then with everyone else. And then at that time, Troy Leopold and Austin Theriault from my office, who are both wildlife biologists, Troy being a specialist, but also Austin also having experience with the spotted owls, went out there and did additional studies for this to come back to hearing. So we did take a whole nother year in between when we were first told about this to study the land and look at the noise levels and look at the spotted owl habitat and make sure there wasn't any before we came to you guys with this project. What else did they bring up? Oh, the other thing is there are a lot of spotted owl activity centers in that area mapped on the database. I wanted to bring up why. And that is because that area is logged a lot. Those are all from projects, mostly from Green Diamond. They are also doing a huge project right like about 2 miles from this project that starts late next year. But that's why there are so many activity areas mapped on there, because that area is logged a lot. So while maybe there is not a historical use of agriculture in that area beyond the last 20 years, that area has been logged and used for those types of land uses for a really long time, and this would prevent logging, actually, all these cannabis projects, because we can't cut down trees with cannabis. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say, and I wanted to kind of give a segue to Troy, who is here to talk about it, because he is one of our foremost wildlife biologist specialists on the spotted owl in the area. If you look at that database, most of those sightings in those activity centers in southern Humboldt are him that actually found the owls. So I just wanted to kind of point that out to everybody, and thanks for hearing me out again.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Troy Leopardo, and I'm honored to be in front of you. I've wanted to give this little talk for a long time now. The last time didn't turn out so well. The first things first is this, I was misquoted and my internet connection was bad, but the actual site is non-habitat. Spotted owls do not forage in open meadows. As a matter of fact, my experience, spotted owls don't really roost or nest within 500 feet of an opening. As we all learned, they are a forest interior species, and they depend on originally, when I first started working with the spotted owl in 1988 on the Siskiyou National Forest, we all believed that they were old growth dependent, and that's what we had kind of learned at Humboldt State. It was listed under that premise in 1990, and so for the reason they did all the work in the Pacific Northwest. And so there were only 2 flavors of habitat up there. There was recently clear cuts, and there was old growth. And so all the good work that was done in the Pacific Northwest, it came up with an initial hypothesis that the spotted owl needed 3,400 acres of old growth. And that's where we get the 1.3-mile circle from, is this initial idea that the spotted owl was old growth dependent, and to capture all the area potentially within the home range, we needed to extend our surveys out to 1.3. Now, I went to work for a private consultant in 1990, and so to sum up, I have 34 years worth of spotted owl experience. I have 32 years worth of experience working under the forest practice rules with CAL FIRE and forestry here in Humboldt County. It took about a couple of years to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to understand that there were a lot more spotted owls in redwood country than they had ever thought. So the assessment area shrunk to 0.7 for the redwood region. So since 1992 or so, we only need to survey out to 0.7 if the project area is within the redwood region. And the project areas are always logging. And there was never any reason to survey for spotted owls for any other activity. It has never come up. It has never come up for vineyards. It has never come up for anything else. And so my experience comes from forestry. And I worked with CAL FIRE, who's the main lead agency on spotted owls, for 32 years. It's complicated. And because it has such an impact on private landowners where a spotted owl could be, CAL FIRE enacted a law, minimum requirements for somebody to analyze spotted owl impacts for forest practice rules. And that says you need to have a minimum of 5 years worth of survey experience to be able to approach the CAL FIRE on spotted owl issues. I'm not going to take up, we're all tired. And I'm going to answer questions, and I hopefully, so what has happened is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service handed down guidelines to CAL FIRE that they enacted into the forest practice rules. Part of the minimum requirements was 5 years minimum experience. The other requirements are they divided up the range between the interior, where they still kind of required us to survey within 1.3 miles, and the coastal redwoods, where the assessment area shrunk to 0.7. Little by little, some of these guidelines have changed, but the thresholds of significance that are enacted in state law for spotted owls have pretty much been the same for 20 years. And it's those thresholds of significance that I'm using when I analyze impacts of spotted owls. I think the misunderstanding that arose from last time is that the forest practice rules looks at impacts on owls from timber harvesting, habitat removal, and it also looks at it from just noise. Because often a logger will finish logging it in the fall, and then the next spring they have an acre left of timber. There's not going to be any extra trees cutting, but they're going to have to come in there with tractors. They're going to make noise. And so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wrote guidelines for noise disturbance that they gave to the state of California. They just changed those guidelines in 2020. And those guidelines, pretty much, the guidelines say that imagine the sound of a redwood tree falling, this big, huge sonic boom. That impact travels only out to a quarter mile. That's as far as logging noise will impact the spotted owl. If you are going to take the habitat, on the other hand, then you needed to survey within the full assessment area. And also, you needed to find the owl, and you need to make sure that you left a core area of mature forest for this spotted owl. And it's 250-acre core area. And it's the best habitat. And so this gets very expensive for landowners, and it's a big deal. And every year, Timber Harvest Plan is active. We go out and we make sure that no spotted owl has moved into the logging areas. And it's kind of a big deal. And as a sidetrack, I'm very concerned that there are people out there hooting for owls for cannabis consultations that aren't disclosing this, and then I may make a mistake of thinking that's a real spotted owl. There are other problems with that, as we will come back to. But for this reason, every February, all of us that do spotted owl surveys for timber harvesting under the guidance of CAL FIRE, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the California Department of Fish and Game meet at Corbell, and we coordinate our surveys. We make sure that we don't survey so that, because calling for spotted owls unneededly can be a take under the Endangered Species Act. Because this hoot, woo, 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 that travels a mile and a half. And I can assure you, a spotted owl really, they operate at night. They do not care about a half a dozen greenhouses in a grassy opening. But if I'm standing there at night imitating its call, it's going to think there's another spotted owl. And it's going to come moving in, and it's going to elicit a territorial response. And what I'm really concerned about here is that I started surveying for spotted owls in 1980 here, 1990 down here. I've done a lot of work in Sprout Creek. Barnum Timber Company was a big client of mine, so is Green Diamond. My concern is that, in my estimation, we've lost half of our spotted owl population to barred owls. And so I'm an advocate. And the fact is that after all these years, the state hasn't done anything to remove these barred owls. This is a federal deal. They're doing it on Indian reservations, and they're doing it on Forest Service. But anyway, if we were to do something good about the spotted owl, we would think about removing barred owls, and we would have the cannabis growers pay for it. Now, that's opinion. That's opinion. Now, back to what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is very clear about the guidelines for analyzing take. And What's really interesting is that since they're enacted under state law and the forest practice rules, they are the best thresholds of significance for analyzing potential take of spotted owls. An owl just flying by isn't a take. It's all directed around nesting or roosting areas. And it's very important that we find that nesting and roosting area. So when I analyzed the impacts to this particular project, I analyzed it the same as if it was a 3-acre conversion in California. Because 3-acre, I'm sorry I don't have my report in front of me. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says that anything less than a 20-acre habitat clearing isn't really meaningful. In terms of the spotted owls goggles, anything bigger than 20 acres could have an impact. So for that reason, we're not required to do spotted owl surveys for a 3-acre exemption in California. It's not done. The licensed forester sends his designee, they check the database, they do a site search, and then they write it up. And so that is the method, the state method, that I used to analyze the impacts to spotted owls. I think I've covered most of it, and I would be happy to take questions.
Any questions? No, thank you. I think we're
No
good.
questions?
Thank
I have
you.
a
That
lot
was,
more. It's
it
late.
was,
Th-
it was
thanks
so
for your
well
time.
done. We don't have.
Impressive hooting. All right. Next caller is John Schofield.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify, I joined in a little bit late. Were we talking about the cultivation site up on Greenwood Heights?
No, that one was earlier. It's finished.
Oh, my bad then. All right, I'm sorry to waste your time on that one then. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Public 7108, and then we'll get you. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yes, thank you. I'll start off with the access. I did look at the watershed map, and where this is at looks like there's a lot of other cannabis grows in the immediate area. And this morning on the zoning administrator approved, I don't know, half acre or something, an expansion on the Sproul Creek Road, and there was some real questions about the capacity of the road and the pinched corner and stuff. And so it was determined that since those people live there and blah, 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 there wouldn't be much more traffic, even though the bigger the operation, the more delivery trucks. And then trucks, vehicles taking stuff off the property as well. So, and the road evaluation report said there was 8 other roads or something. I don't know if they're already approved or not, but I think all that should be taken into consideration of how much is on this road already and the impacts of expanding it even further. Yeah, so I think an acre is too much, and they should downsize and protect our wildlife. The noise stuff, taking your calculations and blowing, and then figuring what will average that out. In nature, there's quiet times. It isn't every day the wind's blowing, making so much noise. And the person that was on before, made this owl hooting sound and said the owl could hear that a mile and a quarter away. Well, I'm saying a bunch of these generators that you can hear them from a long, long ways away as humans and wildlife that they're dependent on how much noise there is a big deal. So I hope you consider that and whether we really need to double this and expand it to an acre in this location.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. All right, there was a gentleman here in the audience.
Hello. Thank you for your time. My name is Austin. I've surveyed this property multiple times, and I've been doing this for 5 years in Humboldt County. I've surveyed hundreds of properties all over the place. And honestly, this property is kind of the ideal situation. The location is a ridge top, open meadow, with there's no tree removal. There was pre-existing cannabis, but those sites are also ideal in the slope and setbacks to water courses. There's a large pond right next to everything, and overall, this is a great project that I'm really excited to present to you guys. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have Scott Bauer from Fish and Wildlife with us. He was as an attendee. Now he's on the panelist side. So Scott, if you're there, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Bongio. Yeah, Scott Bauer, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We just received the report this morning, the report from Mr. Leopardo, and so our review is pretty limited for, but I just want to bring up a few things, and I'm by no means saying this is we oppose of this project, but we just have some concerns. The report, one of the things it says is that, and I'll quote, this is regarding detection of spotted owls in surveys. This 20-year-old detection is likely does not reflect an actual location. Indeed, NSO detections this old should reasonably be regarded as anecdotal. So that's an interesting way of looking at detections, and it's not really anecdotal. It means that that habitat is occupied, and we're focused on habitat. Whether the owl is there or not, it's still habitat if there's been detections. There's also a detection that occurred right on the edge of the prairie where this cultivation site occurs. So owls do use it, and owls are in the area. There's activity centers all over, and the reason they're old and dated is because nothing's been done out there requiring a survey. So we really just are concerned about the habitat, right? And it's not so much that the cultivation site and grading activities will disturb habitat per se, but it's the activity itself, right? It's the potential for light escaping from greenhouses, from noise, just general human use on the landscape. And this is an industrial activity that I also want to make a distinction between logging and cannabis. And I think Mr. Leopardo said, brings up logging as a significant issue, but logging is a temporary impact. You come in, you remove trees, and you get out. Whereas cannabis is a permanent fixture on the landscape with lights, with potential generators, with people and dogs. And so it's a different animal. And I think we all recognize that. It's important to have that distinction. So just want you to think about, how you go about permitting this property, that, habitat within the vicinity, within the 1.3 mile, or within these activity center areas, it does matter. And maybe they're not removing habitat, but the impacts from the activity itself can have effects on these species. So that's all. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, can you stay there, Scott? Commissioner Mulder would like to ask you a question.
Through the chair, and maybe I misheard your the comments, but I thought I heard you say something about an activity was recorded at the edge of this meadow. Was that by a licensed biologist, or are you talking about the note from the neighbor?
No, all the activity centers that I'm looking at through our NSO database are from, and I see the names like Frank Galea, wildlife biologists, various people. I didn't see Mr. Leopardo's name, but it's the one that we have on our database.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. Any other questions for Scott while you have him? All right. Thank you, Scott, for calling in.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other public that wishes to speak on this item? No? You've had time.
As the consultant, I don't get to talk.
I'll let you come back if you got one point, but we're not going to have a
Well, I have
long
a
time.
couple points because they all
Make
came
it
back
fast.
and had more comments afterwards, sorry, but I wanted to address what Bonnie said about the road evaluation. There was one part on the road evaluation that all the neighbors in Sproul Creek used, and my clients that were, the permit she was discussing this morning, have agreed to fix the county road or deal with the county road as a part of their project. This pitch point on the county road is 4 miles from that project and 6 miles from this project. The rest of the road met the functional capacity of the Category 4 standard. And then I think that, I don't know if you guys wanted to talk to Troy again about the thing, but I did want to say that as far as like this cultivation actually affecting spotted owls, this is an outdoor cultivation. There are no lights. It's not a mixed light. There is no generator use. It's all on solar panels with a generator that's strictly used for backup and hardly ever used. And this cultivator stopped growing in 2016. None of this is a matter of a violation or anything else. This guy has been a good player, and now it's 2022. So I just want to say that we've had a lot of studies and we've had a lot of pushback, and we're still trying 4 years later. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Last time, anybody else that wishes to speak on this? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public. No, sir.
It's okay.
No,
You
you're
heard
done.
enough from me.
We did.
But
Thank you.
Basically, you have an obligation to listen to people
Please.
who are qualified.
And we did.
Don't have 5
Gave
years
you
worth of
gave you
experience.
much more than
The
everybody
Freedom of
else had.
Information Act would show that.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to close the public comment and bring it back to the commission. Any questions, thoughts on where to go with this one?
I just have a question about, I think one of the speakers talked about not having it be a smaller grow. Would that have any positive impact on, this question about habitat for spotted owl?
I think Commissioner O'Neill, through the chair.
Go ahead.
Are you referring to the alternative staff recommendation that identified?
It was brought up by one of the speakers that it could be a smaller footprint. And my question is, would that have a positive impact on this question about spotted owl habitat?
Well, I think one of the things that's really important that is kind of being debated here, you heard the biologist, the expert in the field, identify that, in his opinion, this is not habitat. I think you heard testimony from CDFW indicating that they believe that this area is utilized by NSO and would qualify as habitat. And so, unfortunately, the real question here for the commission to wrestle with is, where do you want to fall on that issue? Is that if it's habitat, then the new cultivation shouldn't be approved, can't be approved, and if it's not habitat, it can be. If it is habitat, the pre-existing can be approved under circumstances.
Go ahead, Noah.
Okay, well, thank you, because I think that's clarifying and sort of distills it down to the core issue. I mean, I want to say I'm sympathetic to the applicants, because I do think in most respects, really in all relevant respects, this seems like a well-designed project with well-intentioned applicants and consultants and all the rest of it. I go back, though, to what Director Ford mentioned at the last meeting, which is that, we in this ordinance, unlike the standards that may apply under, the forest practice rules on timber and things like that, we in this ordinance have set a standard for how we protect northern spotted owls. And as the director said last time, again, I can't quote you exactly, but you said something to the effect that you've been hearing over the years from foresters and other professionals that our standard is too high and unnecessarily protective or unnecessarily conservative. And that may well be the case. But, as I understand the issue here, it's, if it's not whether the habitat is being removed, it's not even whether there's presence of owl on the property, because we know there's been activity centers within 1.3 miles in the past. It's not even whether we think the impacts of this particular property are going to be that impactful. It's just, applying the rules of our ordinance to say, is there habitat here? And is there a documented presence within 1.3 miles? And if those two conditions are met, then this new cultivation can't be allowed. That's my understanding. And given the testimony of, with all due respect to Mr. Or Dr. Leopoldo.
No, I'm not a doctor.
Okay.
But I have the 5 years, and Scott Bauer doesn't have the 5 years of experience. So he's not a spotted owl expert.
Okay, I take your point.
And that you don't put a uniform on somebody and make them an expert.
Okay,
And it's the lead
Enough.
agency's responsibility.
Enough.
Okay. All that being said, I think Scott Bauer does have a certain expertise and is qualified to weigh in on the question at hand, which is how we apply the rules in our ordinance to the particular case here. So I'm unfortunately leaning towards feeling that we cannot approve the new cultivation, that I would support going with the alternative resolution, which would approve the pre-existing only. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Thomas. I've had my hand up for a while, but go ahead. Well, I'd just like to understand how this was asked to come back to us, I don't know how many months ago, when Fish and Game just got the report this morning. What am I missing here?
Well, so there's a couple different things going on. Dave Manthorn and Scott Bauer reached out to me last night and asked about this, and so we did send them the report this morning. We have been identifying that this project was going to come forward to the Planning Commission, in fact, since last April, when another person with CDFW asked that it go to the Planning Commission. So we've been forecasting that this was coming forward and letting them know that, but I think the problem is that you have different teams that we sometimes interact with CDFW. And so the referrals and the CEQA comments that we're getting, and this would probably be a question for Scott Bauer more, because I don't want to misrepresent what's happening with CDFW, but they're not going to Scott's team. So it was, so I'm not sure if the two groups are talking. I don't know. And I see Scott has his hand up, so he might be able to clarify that for you.
Sure, go ahead, Melanie.
I think that what concerns us is that we had specifically requested that we hear from CDFW and the biologist. And so our presumption would have been that as soon as the report was ready last week, it would have gone back.
Sure, if I could, through the chair, the report has been there. The report was from last October, so it has been ready. I'd have to go back in and see, when exactly we did send this and directly to who that was to. It probably would not have been Scott Bauer's team, because my understanding is they're not responding to referrals anymore. So it was a little unique
as much as I don't
get that
want
response.
to open it back up, I'm going to let Scott, he put his hand back up, so I'll let him respond to this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As far as I know, no one in our department received the report. Maybe I'm mistaken, but, I I thought what we decided some time ago when it came to NSO was that, especially on an issue like this, that the report would be, just, sent to our department and, alerted someone, to the fact that there's an issue that we should comment on. So, something like this would at least come to my attention because I've been to this property in 2015 on an inspection warrant. So I'm at a loss, and unless planning department, has an email showing that it went to another staff within another team, it's just something that none of us received. So, and that happens. Hold no hard feelings, but as far as I know, we received it this morning after we inquired. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Scott. That's probably here nor there, but it would seem like that should have got to him a long time ago, but that's, I don't know. All right. Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Commissioner Levy's comments, and I also wanted to add that the cumulative impact, if you look at this particular area, is something else that could be of concern. As Mr. Bauer pointed out, that these cannabis operations are not temporary like logging; they are permanent. And so, if we're talking about a loss of habitat, then this would be one of the areas that might be an area of concern. And again, I'm not saying that I think there is. I don't have data to support that. But I think that a cumulative effect study would be warranted.
All right. Go ahead, Thomas.
So after the last time we heard this, I went back to my newly acquired forestry practices book, read through, I think it was page 112 through 116, and I don't remember if it was the next day or the next week. I contacted the director and I was like, I don't agree with our ordinance. Honestly, I don't agree with it. I think it's too restrictive. With that being said, I have to respect professionals and professionals' reports. So the report that we had submitted to us says it's not habitat, and that's the question where it's a difference of, I'm hearing people saying that they believe it is habitat. You have DFW saying it's potentially habitat. It's open meadow. I mean, I looked land gliding and kind of looked around there as far as, so I'm basically saying I agree with the report that it's not habitat, and it'll probably, I don't know how the vote's going to shake out, but that's my opinion of what I'm agreeing with. I'm not a professional. That's where I'm going with it.
All right. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Thomas.
This goes back to my residential thing for staff. This open meadow, if there's no cannabis allowed there, would they be allowed to permit a residence, multiple thousand square foot residence powered by a 45 kW generator, yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may add, they could be allowed to log it too.
All right. Any other discussion? Anybody want to make a motion on this one? We're past the bewitching hour, so.
Well, again, I can certainly see both sides of this, but since I've already kind of stated where I fall, I think I will make a motion. Let's see. I don't know that I have the language from the alternative spelled out, but the motion I want to make is that we deny the application for new cultivation due to the NSO mitigation restrictions and approve the existing cultivation only.
Thank you. And through the chair, I would just add, we would recommend that if you do make that motion, that you also add a condition of approval to have them revise their propagation area to no more than 10% of the existing. Because right now it is proposed at 10% of what's being proposed.
Right. Okay. So with that additional condition that Mr. Johnson just said, that's my motion, if that's sufficiently clear.
Go ahead.
If I could, Chair, thank you. And that does include finding that you've considered the addendum to the EIR
Certainly, yes.
and making all the findings to support the alternative with just approving the area for the pre-existing cultivation.
That is exactly what I intended to move. Thank you.
And are we including the special permit to allow pre-existing and cultivation areas between 15 and 30% slope?
Yeah, that's where the pre-existing was.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I guess is implied by my motion, yes.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion?
I just want to state that I'm with Thomas in agreement there. We have a difference of opinion for reports, and I'm probably going to vote against the motion right now.
No hard feelings.
All right.
Sorry, I was leaning back because I realized you had an even number.
All right, Suzanne. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongio,
No.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
No.
Commissioner Mulder.
No.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so we have a tie vote, so you could take another attempt. Go ahead, Director.
I was just going to say, you can continue to try to formulate motions. You can continue it to allow the full complement of commissioners to be here.
Well,
It'd be the middle of the month, yeah.
what does the commission feel like doing? Go ahead, Thomas.
Well, from my understanding, I guess the way I'm seeing the vote went down, we have 3 commissioners that are believing it's not NSO habitat and 3 commissioners that's believing it is NSO habitat. Is that correct or incorrect?
I think that's correct.
That's probably correct.
So I don't know that, I mean, unless I'm just going to say I'm not going to come off of my position of believing it's not habitat. So then I guess maybe we could go down the line of if one of us believes one way or another, but otherwise we're going to sit here 3-3 all night long.
Well, I think it might be better than to wait. That's probably a good point, to wait for our seventh commissioner and address this again. Maybe by then we can get some formal response from Fish and Wildlife as well. So it's kind of a win-win. I don't like putting them off, though. I'd rather have the vote tonight. But if everybody's in agreement with that, you give us a date that it would come back to us.
June 16th.
All right.
Well, I think it would be great to, I mean, Mr. Bauer did say that he would have liked more time to review the report, and that was my main concern. So I think that's a really good solution. So I'll motion to continue this to the June 16th meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second. Or, yeah, sorry.
Mike beat.
Mike beat me, yeah.
Any further discussion? Or? All right. Roll call vote. Please, Suzanne.
Okay. I'm almost ready. Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimous. So with that, we obviously aren't going to get started on anything else, and so we need to continue a couple other items. I just lost my agenda. So items that need to be continued, I'm going to assume to the next meeting.
I would offer that a motion could be made to continue Organic Humboldt LLC, continued Emerald Sky Growers Incorporated, and continue the workshop for the Nordic Aqua Farms California project to the meeting of June 2nd.
And can we make sure that those get put at the front of the meeting so that the ones that have been waiting, you know?
Absolutely.
All right. Go ahead, Thomas.
How late are we allowed to stay at these meetings?
That it used to be 9:30, but
Yeah, I think the security service is technically off at 9:30.
yeah.
And so we're not supposed to have people in the building after that.
Okay. I was going to ask to work, stay later. I've had a meeting that's gone from 4:30 till 1 o'clock the next morning, I think. So I'm not
Yeah.
scared of meetings after work.
Yeah, we did some late ones too, but
Yeah.
we're not going to do it on this. So do I got to have a motion to continue those three items? And you said to
And to move them.
June 2nd.
2nd.
To June 2nd.
So motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right.
Who was the first?
Mike,
Okay, sorry.
Melanie.
And Mike and Melanie and I gotta. All right. Commissioner Bongio,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner McCaver,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder.
I'm going no. I want to work till 10:30.
Yeah.
All right. So motion carries 6-1.
5-1.
5-1, yeah,
Five.
actually.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dare to be different.
If we just had 25 more minutes of meeting time twice a month, it would be the equivalent of my commute for that extra meeting.
Oh, yeah. Security people. Yeah.
You're allowed to do that.